Good echo. Good morning, boys and girls. We are here with John Peterson, an irrational empiricist, and we are going to discuss philosophy. maybe we'll see. Maybe. First of all, we have to discuss what happened last night with that fucking Bill Morgan. And fucking Bill Morgan is actually a medical term. FBM is it? I mean, it should be a medical term. He was on Neff's after show, and he was saying, "Oh yeah, I don't go after the little things like citrate metabolism. I want to know. They got to tell me how do you make a dog? How do you make a dog?"
Do you know what the big things are based on? It's the little things. Yeah. That's what it means. Yeah. That's not how science works.
How do you make a dog? It's just like and he was proud of that. He's proud of that. He said, I just take them on. I just grab the bull by the horns, and they got to tell me, how do you make a dog? I gave you a link, Ness. Like, damn it, I invited you. Jesus, some people.
I just want to say I went to Neff's after show again. I'm making a declaration to myself. Yeah, I'm not doing this anymore.
We went to David Neff's after show, and I looked over and I saw you on Nephilim Free's after show, and I thought, you haven't learned yet, have you, son?
Can I call you son? I've learned my lesson.
Can I call you Sonny? Am I old enough to call you Sonny?
You're 70, for Christ's sakes. You have to be.
Yeah, I'll call you all Sonny.
I mean, you could. Well, not me.
Well, you too. You're pretty fucking.
Oh, well, you were fucking when you were 13 years old, huh?
Huh?
I said you were fucking when you were 13 years old, huh?
I was trying. Are we talking about women or?
Well, that's the only way you would have made me.
I guess so.
You're Sonny. But I mean, I'm thinking that like the other people in this room, you could probably call them grandsonny at your age.
Oh yeah, okay. Well, I had my daughter was born when I was 17, so.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty young.
Hey, real quick, I thought of something after encountering Otangelo and Danny for a few moments seemed to be white knighting Otangelo yesterday, which is fine. I don't balk at that, but because we are rough on Otangelo, but I think he deserves it because he won't ever consider the idea that he's wrong. So he was saying to me, commenting on the fact that I've admitted more than once that Otangelo does know more about this stuff than I do, but I misspoke. What I was trying to say is that Otangelo knows more about the jargon and the terminology, and he's able to say the words. He loosely, maybe more than loosely, knows what some of the words mean, but he loosely knows what they mean, and and what the the gist of it, I guess. But I thought of this analogy. What it is that Otangelo, I liken it to Otangelo being able to open up the hood of a car and being able to identify every part and explain what that part may or may not do. But then if the car broke down, he doesn't know enough about what's under the hood to fix it. Or to tell you how all the parts go together to make the car work.
John, that is so spot on. I mean, anybody can read biology at a surface level and not know a thing about molecular biology or genetics or chemistry or any of that. And you can sound like you really know what you're talking about. And that's exactly what these guys do. They've never spent the time to go down and figure out, exactly what happens when two atoms collide. They just, they're looking at it at like this, I don't know, it's like a descriptive level. Is that what you'd call it? How about you, Ness? Sorry,
I don't know.
Yeah. So I read 20 pages of Fodor, and I don't think I did misunderstand the coextensive argument or any of that coextension argument. It's just that I was with how Adam and Danny was. I thought it was something deeper than it was. you know? So I wasn't sure if I was, you know, am I missing something here or something? And I don't think I'm missing anything. I don't know.
Hey, you never did forward me that Danny's email.
Danny's. Oh, shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, I never do anything that you tell me to do the night before because I totally forget about it. See, I'm born again every morning.
Really?
Yeah, born again every morning, brand new, fresh. Don't remember a fucking thing about what happened yesterday.
Oh, well, so you got that $100 you owe me?
I thought it was. I thought you owed me 100.
No,
As long as we're making shit up, you know. That's the other thing is I can make up anything I want at the beginning of the day.
well, it's like when early on when my mom's, you know, dementia was onsetting, and we all joked about it and shit. Like she even joked about it. Like she one day we were in the middle of a conversation and I was standing next to her couch, and all of a sudden she looked up at me and she said, "And who are you again?" I was like, well, I'm your son. And then she just started laughing.
Oh, she thought it was funny.
I used to tell her that you know, the best thing about what was happening to her, she could hide her own Easter eggs.
Yeah. Yep. I'm getting there.
Yeah, the one where he told us that syllogism and he was saying that he would write it out. He said the day before yesterday, I think.
I'm looking for it. I'm looking.
Well, I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Like, you're like I am. Like, Knock had to tell me at the end of our stream the other day. I'm like trying to link something in the chat, copy something somebody tried to link, but it wouldn't post because YouTube sucks. But and then like there was just like dead air there, and like Knock is like, "What's going on?" And I said, "Well, I'm trying to copy this link and post it." And he's like, "Well, yeah, you could be doing that after the stream's over. Like, we can't have dead air like this." Like,
I wish the hell I could find out where he sent it to me. Shit.
He said he's
also, Speed, I was also looking at this stuff in the meantime, and I found somebody else, a different objection to the argument.
From Rosenberg?
Yeah, yes, exactly. Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Oh, you already know about it.
I thought it was pretty apt. It's basically Fodor was mistaking selecting for when what actually happens is things are selected against, and it was just he had a conversation with Owen Flanagan as a philosopher of the mind, and so is Rosenberg. And Rosenberg's a lot like me. He's a scientist. He believes in that's science and naturalism. He's very strict, and I kind of like the guy, so it's pretty cool.
Right. Like I think you can talk about like if we want to call organisms basically like units, like little machines, just for simplicity's sake. Some machines might run better than others in a given situation, and some might not run better. But like of course the ones that don't work as well as other ones aren't gonna make it. Like, yeah, swimming machines can. Darn it, that's not a good analogy. Sorry.
I think one thing I may have said yesterday. I don't know if he asked me if it was a law. I said no, it was a brute fact, or it was a fact. It's so tautological that, and truth is a tautology basically. True is true, you know, that sort of thing. But I mean, it is so simple to understand what is being said in evolution. But I like the idea that Rosenberg came up with, and he said it out loud. He said there are no laws in biology. Either Rosenberg or somebody said that. But anyway,
so can I?
There are no laws in the special sciences.
Yeah, the special side. And when you think about it, you know, if we made a law that the fittest is going to survive. And suppose genetics was really simple. There was only one gene, and there was only one trait, and this one organism had that trait, and he had the perfect version of it. Okay, and that organism got hit by a meteor, then our law breaks, right? Because he could be hit by a meteor. So just
real quick before we get too far past it, I just want to say to Andrew, in bringing up that machine analogy, why don't you just marry Otangelo?
Yeah. Yeah. Why don't you guys get a rum?
Hello, Danny. Are you doing well?
Hey, are these people bullying you, Andrew?
No.
Huh? What?
No, I
We're
heard
bullying.
something.
Yeah, we're bullying Andrew.
Speed bullies me all the time.
Well, wait a minute. I thought, Danny, I thought you were Otangelo's white knight, not Andrew's.
Yeah.
I'm everyone's white knight.
So, Danny, what email did you send your syllogisms to, or your argument, your premises?
For the mine stuff?
Yeah, I think that was
did I
it.
send it to? I think it was the MB. I don't know. I don't want to dox you. So
Michael Brusnak. Fuck him up.
yeah, the one that you sent me the Google Docs to.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. There you go. Now I found her. I found it. So opening down. Okay. Yeah. So I'm going to forward that to John. That's okay.
Yeah, of course. I don't mind. Yeah, you can forward that whoever you want. I put it together pretty fast, but it should be enough to like really get started. If anybody wants to talk about it.
Anybody else want it?
I'm good.
Okay.
It's a picture, so you can put it in pretty easily. Put it in chat.
Wow, that was a shot.
Oh.
No, I'm good. Never mind.
Wait.
What?
Hey, Top Dog.
Hey.
Someone needs access to this file. What the fuck? Oh, okay. I'm also giving you access to the Google Doc for Smokey at the same time, but I don't give a fuck. I don't just ignore it.
Oh no, I went over that. I could access that document.
Yeah. Okay. Yep. Okay. I need more coffee. More coffee. So, are you familiar with Rosenberg and his criticisms of Fodor?
I'm familiar with Rosenberg, but I'm not familiar with all the criticisms of Fodor. No.
I like Rosenberg.
I think he's a great philosopher. I think he really messed up versus Craig, though, and it made rudimentary mistakes.
He debated Craig?
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
But he's not really a philosopher of religion, so he's good with other stuff.
Have you also seen the debate with Sean Carroll? Or
I saw that when I was like really young.
And
I feel like that was a long time ago.
Did Sean make mistakes, or
I don't remember.
Oh,
I think that traditionally, from what the grapevine is, he did well, but I didn't actually listen to it. I don't remember it. When was this? 2014. Yeah, that's when I started interest in philosophy of religion.
Yeah, so this whole thing about coextension wasn't as complicated as I thought it was going to be. It's just basically you have two traits, and two traits can be like two genes can be linked, and one gene can have absolutely no function at all, or it can have a slightly deleterious function. And if it's linked to a gene that happens to be necessary for the organism to survive, then that gene is always going to be hitchhiking. So,
right. Yeah. Free riders, I think, is what Fodor.
Free riders. Yeah. So there's always free riding genes, and I mean that happens a lot.
It's not just genes, though. It's also phenotypes, right? That.
Well, you got to be careful when you start talking about. You see, and I think that's where we were talking past each other yesterday. That I don't think in terms of phenotypes as much as you do. I think more in terms of what the genetic composition is and what's happening at the gene level.
Well, the point is that like what the set of genes that are responsible for thump noises of the heart are also responsible for pumping, right? So the point is that why is it that, well, obviously our knowledge of physiology, medicine, whatever, it's useful to understand those genes in terms of the pumping mechanism of the heart, right? Or sorry, to understand the pumping mechanism of the heart in terms of that, and not really think about thump noises, right? Because it just seems so straightforwardly that's the interesting phenotype, right? And I mean, like, you can get some ridiculous phenotypes, that have a 1-to-1 correlation with whatever phenotype that you care about. I mean, like whiteness and flashiness, right? Like there's like it reflects light. There's like a flashiness or potential flashiness of white that other colors may not have. But we don't really talk about flashiness. That's not really as of interesting as like camouflage or or anything like that.
So Danny, may I ask a question? So like, what in this example of an organism with, let's just pick a random heart, and it makes the thumping noises. What particular environment is this organism in? Like just like what specific one?
You want to create a
Like, if you could-
hypothetical?
Yeah.
Is what you're asking me? Oh, okay. Let's just say my environment. My heart is thumping, and also pumping.
Okay.
I mean, it's pretty easy to come up with a counterfactual where the thumping noise would attract predators.
Right.
And,
That's
and
what I
now
was
we
gonna say.
now we have something that's going to have selective pressure against both those genes.
Yeah, you can always create an
Right.
environment in which that in which it's possible that the uninteresting coextensive trait is being selected. But that's the thing.
And Jerry's point is that natural selection can't work on counterfactuals.
That well, in terms of what the interesting phenotype or whatever it is, that natural selection is not going to be something that you ultimately or that you appeal to at all. Actually, I say ultimately, but yeah, I know that we don't like that language, so maybe it's not the right word. But the point is that to understand which trait, A or B, right? B is coextensive with A. Is the interesting phenotype. That's going to be determined by the environment, right? Not natural selection.
Yeah, and the thing is that we think in terms of natural selection does not select for single genes; it works for the whole organism. The thing is, there's a separation here. When we go from genotype to phenotype, we have considerable transformative functions happening in order to get to that phenotype. And what you're doing is you're considering you're not just considering the genotype, you're considering the context, the mother's egg, the mother's womb, and the entire environment that the organism grows up in and reproduces in. And that environment could have a meteorite hit him or a tree hit him on top of the head. So I mean, there is no law-like thing that you can say, but that does not change the fact that there is a statistical significance to how populations grow up and behave and reproduce. And so you always want to look at it as not a law like we're not looking for laws of nature, and I don't think Darwin was either. We're looking for a statistical trend in what an organism is going to end up being. And that statistical trend is not going to be based always on traits. It's most certainly not going to be based on the fittest traits.
But isn't the question like what explains the statistics, like with respect to gene frequencies?
Well, yeah. What explains the statistics in population genetics? You start out with a real simplified model. It doesn't consider the environment at all. You're just considering the genotype and which genes, and then you start working, and that's where creation is.
That doesn't make sense to me, though, right? Like,
okay, let's try to have it make sense.
Can you repeat what you said to make sure I understand first? It seems like you're saying something like the statistic or the probability is understood in terms of the genotype itself. That's what I thought you said.
That is where we start when you start looking at the model and you start teaching genetics. You always start with this simplistic model, and that is entirely statistical. Okay,
look, do you think it's statistically, like statistically speaking, like let's just take the heart and the pumping mechanism of human beings with respect to the heart, right?
Yeah.
Seems like there's a strong probability that if your heart is beating, that you're like more likely to propagate your genes or have reproductive success, right?
I used to drink a lot, and I'm not entirely sure if that's true.
But the point is that why is it that there's that kind of statistical advantage of the heart? And then is the response natural selection? Because you could just create an environment in which hearts are selected against, and then suddenly the whole model, as you're saying, like collapses. So it seems like the advantage, all the statistics surrounding reproductive success and survival in the heart, right, are understood in terms of the environment that it's in.
There is a problem here in that you want to say, okay, if you want to talk about the heart and you want to make a case for the heart to be an explanation of why the organism is as it is today, then you would fall into that category that I think Fodor and others are raging against, this simplistic Dawkinsonian idea. And I don't think you want to do that. Okay. You remember where I started out here. I said, when we start teaching and modeling genetics simply, I did not say when we start trying to figure out what the universe is doing.
Can I just interject?
I just don't see that as a response.
I'd just like to interject really quick, because I think that where you're making your mistake, Danny, and as hard as it is for us to fathom that you would make a mistake, is that I can never say anything without being a dick. I'm sorry. You're saying that it's the response. Okay, when you're talking about the heart, you say, that you said natural selection is the response, and no, I don't think natural selection is the response. Natural selection is the label we put on the response, which could be myriad responses. There could be, many things that might happen from that scenario you drew up. But it's not that the response is natural selection in and of itself. It's that whatever response happens, we label that natural selection because it selected that response or that mutation or that.
Yeah. So in terms of the label, when I think of labels, I think of like a semantic. That's like some kind of semantic. Like we have a label for the phenomenon that is gravity. We have a label for the thing that is.
Well, right. Take labels in and of themselves. Okay. Say you're talking about labels for, there's a factory that cans vegetables. Okay. They have 50 different varieties of vegetables that they can. And they have a label machine which makes the labels for these 50 different labels that go on the different cans. Each and every one of them is a label, but it's a different label. It has the nutritional information and the name of what's in the can, but they're still all labels. That's like all these the mutations, or as you call them, responses, could be a myriad of mutations or responses, and we label that as natural selection.
Well, I don't. Oh, well, what's the response here? When we're talking about are we disputing that? I'm not disputing that we're using the sound natural selection or an inscription, like if I were to type natural selection out, to refer to something in the world, right? If it's indeed a mechanism, right?
Well, and real quick, I sent Speed I woke up this morning thinking about this. As a matter of fact, Speed's channel, always seems to have an adverse effect on my mind. But at any rate, no. So I sent him an email which boiled down to, because I was trying to figure out where you and Speed and the others were talking past one another. And I think, and tell me if this is correct, Danny, I think that your actual objection is that if you're going to call it natural selection, and we say that if a population splits and half of it goes to somewhere where there's different environmental pressures, and then they change as a result of that, I think what you are trying to find out or trying to say is that what's the mechanism between nature and the organism that makes them mutate? Is that what you guys are trying to figure out?
Not
Like,
so much mutation, but
Makes them selected for is what they're trying
right.
to
If the
figure
gene
out.
frequencies change in that new environment across generations, there's a question about what explains that.
well, right. That's what I'm trying to get at. Do you feel as if there's not an explanation? Because
No, there is an explanation.
but there's no mechanism that's identified that directly impacts the changes from nature itself.
No, I don't dispute that. No. So I think there is an explanation for the changes in allele frequencies or the percentages of the traits. The thing is that I think it's somewhat of now. This is separate from Fodor. Fodor talks about coextensionality or of free riders and all that stuff. But I think the initial objection that I was making was something like it just doesn't seem to be very informative to say, oh, because of natural selection. Based on my understanding of natural selection.
Well, if I like generalize natural selection to mean like all adaptations are the product of like
who's hooked up to fucking dial-up modem? Like that's what it sounded like.
Yeah, but I think Ness and I might disagree on that, and I'm not prepared to talk about it. But with respect to Fodor, Fodor is going to say something like, "Okay,
sorry,
when there's changes in the frequencies of these various traits or alleles, whatever we're pointing out as being selected for, there's some other free rider or some other trait that's coextensional with it, and the theory of natural selection is not going to help us differentiate between the interesting trait and the free rider."
No, it won't.
What is even the argument?
I just gave it. That was it.
Speed. What is even the argument? Like, what is the overall discussion? I mean,
I'm gonna have to let Danny redo it.
Yeah. So the idea is that when there's a change in certain frequencies of traits or alleles across several generations within a particular population, when the interesting alleles that we're pointing to, right, or traits that we're pointing to as interesting with respect to why that organism is more apt for its environment, right, is going to be coextensive with some other frivolous trait or some what Fodor calls a free rider. And the theory of natural selection is not really doing any work to tell us that it's not that free rider, rather it's the allele.
Isn't Fodor more of a philosopher than a scientist?
This is a philosophical issue. It's a conceptual
He's
issue.
a failed linguist.
No, so look, if some scientist tells me that there are, square triangles on the Euclidean plane, that we have evidence for this kind of thing, I, as philosophers in the business of conceptual issues, can just say there can't be evidence for such a thing because that kind of thing is impossible, right? So we, as conceptual, and if you do some kind of conceptual analysis of this theory, right, you can make criticisms of it. So it's not a scientific objection; it's a conceptual objection.
Then it has no place in science.
Okay.
Wait. But no, you see, science presupposes coherency and logic, right? So they're beholden to those kinds of things.
To a point, yes.
I don't know what that means.
It means that if nature is telling us something that is unintuitive or doesn't hold up to what was previously known, then we have to accept that. It's not based on the logic alone. It's based on objective logic.
It's very simple, right? Look, if some scientist says 2 + 2 = 5 in one of their calculations, right? A mathematician is able to criticize the scientist, even though that's not a scientific objection, right? It's not like they're pointing out an issue with their observations or the kinds of predictions that their hypothesis generates. Nothing like that,
Sure.
right? It's a mathematical objection, right? In the same way that what Fodor thinks is that if you analyze what these people that forward natural selection as explanatory in certain cases, right? Well, considering what it is, it's not going to help us with respect to what they're saying that it does explain, and that's a conceptual issue, right? Just because there's a conceptual issue that we can push against some kind of natural theory doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to science.
Hello?
Hey, Brenda.
Well, the usefulness of it is that some people were saying things or making statements that were kind of unsupportable, like biological laws and adaptationism, and philosophy tends to check everybody on that, but Fodor kind of just went way the fuck overboard on it.
I mean,
And some of the
how is
statements
what
he
you're saying
made-
useful? How I just don't see you haven't really responded to the objection, and then you're saying that he went off the
I
boats,
haven't
right?
responded to the objection. I told you that, okay, there are some traits that are going to hitchhike along, and they do that. One of the methods is genetic linkage, linkage in the chromosome, because the gene is right next to another gene. Another method is epistasis. There are other, even more complicated ways that this can happen.
Look,
So, I mean, there's going to be all kinds of free riders.
Do you invoke natural selection as to differentiate free riders and the interesting allele or the interesting trait?
Who the hell would do that? I mean, that doesn't make any sense.
It's a yes or no question.
No. Who would do that?
Okay, that's so
Who would do
you
that?
agree with Fodor.
No, I don't agree that it's such a big problem. We knew that.
If natural selection can't
everybody
tell
knew
you
this.
the trait that explains why an organism is doing quote unquote well, right? Why it has reproductive success, and why it survives, or whatever criteria you want to use, then it's a moot theory
Moot
with
theory.
respect to that question.
No, natural selection tells you how the genes work
Oh my gosh!
in the connection with the environment. If you want to find out why the heart thumps, well, then you're talking about an entirely different part of science and a different part of biology, and you're not going to expect natural selection to tell you why organisms have hearts that thump.
Do you think that the pumping mechanism is more important with respect to evolution, or the thump thump noise? Which one?
It
The
depends.
pumping mechanism.
Okay, do you appeal to natural selection as to establish that?
Do I appeal to natural selection as to establish that? Not alone, no. I mean, that would be stupid.
Now, right. So if every trait has some kind of coextensive, frivolous trait or free rider, right? And if it's the case that natural selection cannot be invoked in any of these cases, then the way we come to know what's being selected, or what explains why something is being selected, rather, has nothing to do with natural selection, which is what it's trying to do in the first place.
I don't
It's
think you
trying to-
understand what natural selection is at all.
Okay, what am I wrong about it?
Zero understanding of what natural
Well,
selection
support
is.
your claim.
Okay, you think it
So-
has something to do with which traits are selected, or why an organism looks the way it does? Okay, you think that's what it's about? No, that's not what it's about.
I thought natural selection was a mechanism, which means that it explains why a trait is favorable.
Why a
External. You're trying to talk about an internal change that natural selection is an external explanation.
I don't understand what he's saying. Look, is
I
natural
think
selection
You're trying to reduce natural selection to some kind of a mechanistic law, and you think that actually makes sense, and that isn't how biology works.
it could be a cateris paribus law, right? Which is
Well,
to say that it
I-
applies in certain. If you control for certain conditions, you can expect a particular outcome.
Yes, that would be true.
Okay, that's a cateris paribus law.
Yeah.
Uiteindelijk can you see what I
think-
wrote in the private chat?
Sorry, what did you say, Ness?
Okay, you see what I wrote in the private chat?
Oh, no.
So you're back channeling.
Who's back channeling?
Nestling is back channeling.
I was just writing things
I don't
down.
understand.
In the meantime, you were
Yeah.
talking. But I
So-
said that what if we generalize natural selection to mean adaptive evolution is the product of blind variation sculpted by passive environmental filtration. Like
Yeah,
that's
look, if
the
we're trying-
general
if we're-
general explanation.
If we're trying to reconstrue natural selection, I have to think very slowly, right, on that point, because that, to me, at that point, if we are agree, I have to look for. I'm not, I'm not an expert in what would explain, right, whether we can come to something or some mechanism that would explain these things in a kind of semi-universal manner, and I'm just like, I have to. It takes me time. Like, I can't just look at that and say right or wrong, because like blind variation, for instance, right? Do you just mean random mutation, or
Just
as a
like,
result of mutation?
variation that is not like dependent on foresight. Like
And what's non-adaptive evolution?
I think would be like drift, for example.
Okay. So we're just saying that by adaptive we mean something like I mean, it's going to take me a long time to like actually really think through this, but
I was just saying, like, if we generalize natural selection to mean adaptive evolution is the product of blind variation sculpted by passive environmental filtration, and then that is the general explanation. But when we want to go into the details, like about hearts and polar bears, then we would also need to go into the details of the environmental condition, the filter, basically. So yeah, I think that may be a middle ground. I hope. Maybe
the point,
not.
okay, it's like this, right? Are you familiar with moral particularism?
No, sorry.
I'm a moral particularist, and I think this actually kind of applies, right? But basically, moral particularism is the idea that how you come to know what is good is a kind of circumstantial endeavor, right? It depends.
Circumstantial ethics, basically.
Right. The idea is that it's contextual in terms of what's right or wrong. So if someone asks me, "Do you think lying is right or wrong?" I'm going to look at them and like, well, what context are you talking about? If I'm lying to the Nazis, I think that's the virtuous thing. If I'm lying to my mother about the cookie jar, I don't think that's virtuous, right? Now, so it just depends on the situation, right? And so what particularists are opposed to are these people called generalists, right? So basically you can kind of divide ethics in terms of particularists and generalists. Generalists are going to say, well, there are these kind of moral principles, right, that we appeal to when in whatever kind of situation. So Kant was a very famous generalist, right, where look, how you know what the right thing to do is by invoking some kind of principle, right, like a categorical imperative. Okay, and here this is like a kind of universal thing. There's a universal aspect to what a principle is. Okay, and so the point is that what right and wrong is, okay, is contextualized for the particulars. In the same way, I'm looking at a particular trait in a trait of an organism, right, and as to know whether it's a trait that's selected for or against or whatever, right, really depends on the situation. That's to say, the environment. Okay. And so there's not going to be these kind of, I mean, to Speed's credit, right? He's saying that natural selection is not supposed to do this, right? But
according to my general explanation, the general explanation is not supposed to give the details about like which traits are selected and why, like basically.
Yeah, but to me, this is like saying something like I have a general theory that if students study, more than an hour a day, they'll do better on my exams, right? And that seems like
in biology, like nearly everything is very general. Like you don't really have like strict laws.
Well, this is one of the reasons why I think biology is barely a science, right? But I actually am quite of the opinion that that a lot of this stuff is going to just be reducible and thus eliminated.
But this is also basically one point that I think Alex Rosenberg points out. Like biology is not the only science that is like has this issue. Like all special sciences have non.
Yeah,
No
well,
laws. Like,
there might be like notions like supervenience that you could appeal to as to like, I appealed to reduction to make sense of biology as a science. But the point is that I don't think they're laws of lions. I don't think they're laws of hearts. I don't think they're theories of hearts, right? I don't think they're like there's all these things that
that's basically like Fodor says that evolution, for evolution to work, or maybe natural selection to work, there needs to be such laws, and there are none, so it doesn't work. But I don't agree with that.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah. So then this
wait,
is
wait. Who said that biology is barely a science?
I did.
Oh my God! Did you get in trouble?
Well, the point is that I think a lot of it can just be eliminated and understood in terms of other more fundamental concepts.
Well, if it's not a science, what is it?
Well, it's like psychology or something.
I think you're making the argument like biology is simply physics, or maybe like.
I think that something like this, right? That that biology.
Well, if it's not a science, it's a pseudoscience, then, right?
Well, I said barely a science, which means that for instance, if you're studying the heart, right? You can talk about like it's very useful to create these make these claims that if it stops pumping, right, then you're very likely to die, right? That's like saying, but to me that's like saying if you fall down.
Sorry, let you finish. Sorry.
Yeah, well, okay, like I guess Davidson puts it this way, and I should pull out Davidson, but if someone falls down the stairs and breaks their bone, right? There are no there's that. We're not saying that I'm not saying that it can't be predicted that if you fall down, 3 flights of stairs that you won't, that you'll break bones. But the point is that the reason why I think that could be understood scientifically is that you can reduce everything down to some kind of fundamental truths about the particles, the density, the force, and all these other things, right? And in that sense, we can understand the event in which I fall down the stairs and break my femur as a kind of.
It's a very reductionist approach, I think.
Right, it is but I just don't see how we can really escape that. The other alternative
I think with complex like emergent systems, you cannot really understand the system with like reducing down to the fundamentals. You need to understand the whole the system as a whole.
Are you a scientific anti-realist?
At least in my opinion.
Are you a scientific anti-realist? Because what I'm getting at is that it seems like science to me is ultimately some kind of practical endeavor, right?
My lion just arrived.
So I'm just curious.
I think I could describe myself as a pragmatist.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm eventually going to get at, right? That like when we make these predator-prey models, when we talk about what's likely in terms of falling down 3 flights of stairs, or what happens if you introduce this kind of chemical in the liver, right? That when there's this regularity, right? And it's useful to model the regularities to make future predictions and all this stuff, right? But then you're going to have issues like. I have students that if they study, if they don't study, they make poor grades, right? And I can model that. I can make predictions about that, right? But what I think differentiates one case and the other is that one is going to be reducible to some kind of laws of physics or laws of some very fundamental, there's kind of a fundamental nature to what's going on. Whereas in the case of like psychology, I don't think that it's further reducible, like when we're talking about beliefs.
So you didn't really answer my question.
Yeah. Okay. What was your question, Brenda?
If biology is not a science, then what is it?
I didn't say it wasn't a science.
Well, then what is it then?
I said that it's barely a science, meaning that it's just easily reducible.
To what?
Yeah,
like
I was just about to ask.
physics.
I wanted to ask you. Well, the thing is,
No, it's not.
Physics and chemistry. Hold on here. Physics and chemistry are very, very general topics. Biology is physics and chemistry. It's how physics and chemistry apply to specified processes or systems to understand. It's like saying that condensed matter physics is barely a science because you can just reduce it to basic physics and chemistry, which, yes, you can, but then that ignores all of the nuances within that field. That's what like biology and condensed matter physics are. They're taking those basic generalized subjects like physics and chemistry and applying them in specified ways to better understand the nuances that exist in certain processes or systems, like say life, like biological processes and systems.
But you're
Like
building a structure called biology that is very, very. I mean, it's quite a scaffolding on top of physics and chemistry. And
yes, very much so.
And for you not to say it's barely a science is pretty insulting to a lot of people.
But I think we need to be careful here because I don't think Danny
philosophy
is trying to be. I don't think Danny is trying to be insulting. Maybe he spoke a little too quickly, I might say, but I don't think he
wants to
trying.
retract
Well,
that
no,
statement.
I'm not going to retract the statement because there are a lot of look.
Whoa.
Do you think falling down the stairs and then as to whatever outcome happens, do you think that it can be explained scientifically?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I agree too. Right. But the point is that if we created a new discipline about, people falling down people falling downstairs, right? The falling downstairs discipline of science. Okay. Well, it seems number one that's not very practical. We don't want to invest our resources into that because a lot of what we can know about that can be subsumed in a more fundamental discipline like medicine or physics. Okay. We could talk about the bone density and all these sorts of things, right? The general trends of I don't know. The point.
I'm not getting where you're going with this.
Danny,
well, yeah, okay. There's a lot of.
Yeah,
who wants
there
to
is.
respond to that?
I have also one question, but
We haven't said anything yet.
Yeah. So the point is that if someone were to create a discipline called the falling downstairs subject, right, and create classes and model all sorts of things like we can test for what is likely to happen with respect to you falling down the stairs, given your age, given your sex, given all these other things, right?
I would buy the textbook.
Yeah. The point is that if someone came along and said, well, this is not very practical, it seems like we can just talk about these things by appealing to other already established facts in these other disciplines. I don't know. I just don't see.
Before we continue, I did want to just try another analogy with Danny. Not that he didn't understand my first. I think he probably understood it. He's not stupid. Should I use? Hold on. Should I? Should I use?
Look at creation myths question.
Yeah, I get that. Somebody else can ask that. Should I use fluid dynamics to understand the behavior of water, or should I just reduce that to the positions and momentums of the fundamental particles that make up the atoms that make up the molecules of water?
I think
because in the former, and this is kind of what biology is. In the former, we're generalizing that because it makes it easier and more practical in understanding how water behaves. Secondly, we don't really have the computational ability to understand water in terms of all of the positions and the momentums and the spins of all of the fundamental particles and the forces that are involved with water. And this is why, say, in quantum field theory, a particular division of quantum mechanics, this is something that we do, and it's called renormalization. So when you asked your question or made your statement that biology is sort of, it's barely a science because you can just reduce it to something more fundamental, that's almost, when I hear that in my mind, because I'm very much, physics and stuff, that's like saying, well, why do we bother to renormalize quantum fields? We can just reduce it to the fundamental aspects, but then the math is just hell. It doesn't yield accurate results. We've got to jump through, literally infinite number of hoops when we can just generalize it, still get accurate results, still understand what we're doing in a useful and applicable manner.
Yeah. So let me start with agreeing with what you're saying. I think the way that we think our human minds tend to find it easier to talk about 5s and 10s, 50s, and 100s, right? Like we don't think in terms of 7s, 17s,
Yep.
and 77s, right?
Mhm.
And if someone created a system of exchange where it's instead of based on 5s, 10s, and whatever, it's created on 7s, 17s and 77s, right? That if someone were to say, well, this is barely math, right? Well, yeah, that seems a little bit. I mean, of course it's math, right? To have a system in which everything is construed in terms of those intervals, right? It's just not very practical, right? Now, when we're saying, if someone were to argue, I think it's more practical to think in terms of 17s and 77s rather than 5, 10s and 100s, right? Then I don't really have an argument against them, right? And so the question of
I actually would not either.
Yeah, the question of whether it's you know a lot more about these more fundamental theories than you do, but you took theory A and you said, well, that can just, Danny, this could just be understood in terms of a more fundamental theory. Should we just should we just get rid of the theory? Is it no longer, is it barely a science in that sense? Well, I think it comes down to the practicality of the theory.
What can we get clear on what it is that you're calling science?
Something.
Biology.
So okay, well then, and that's to the second point, right? The second point is that I think many people might say that I have a myopic view of what science is, right? But what it is for me, what it is either going to be one of two things, or so I might be equivocating. But science is whatever can be modeled in terms of exceptionalist laws or law-like statistical truths, right? Or it's going to be something that's a scientific event or a natural event, right? Is going to be something that's reducible to something that is modeled, and
so science is a scientific event. Can you improve that definition just a little bit, please?
I didn't define anything. That wasn't a definition. I'm saying if you take a scientific event, and if you were
I don't know what a scientific event is, because you're telling me what the definition for science is, so I don't know what it's scientific.
I think he means like if I wanted to know like what the behavior of electrons that are orbiting an atom are, like something that I would use science.
Obviously,
mistaken. I didn't define it. And I'm saying
I'm asking you to.
Okay, well, you interrupted me. When I say a scientific event, that can be understood probably in terms of what it could be reduced down to, that can be modeled in the way that in the first rendition of what I understood science to be, right? So something like me falling down the stairs and breaking my leg could be understood in terms of a natural or scientific thing, right? In virtue of it that it could be principally understood in terms of modeled models and theories and laws, right? And so that is one usage of the word science. But the former really is really highly reductive, right? The first rendition would establish that when you're studying cats or the behavior of cats, right, or or ecology, right, that's not science, right? But if you take the second rendition, right, the kind of reductive, that when you study the all the genes of that produce all these various kinds of fur in cats, right, that's all, since that is this kind of natural inquiry or scientific inquiry in virtue of it, and principally being understood in terms of other fundamental laws,
You've said a lot of stuff, but I still don't really know what science is.
So did you understand the first definition?
Well, the first definition, not particularly. Could you put it more
something
succinctly?
That could be modeled in a law or law-like manner.
Right. So we can model natural selection.
Well, yeah, that gets back into Fodor. But do you accept that now you understand what I mean by science in that sense, right? There's also
not really. It's a really bad definition, but because they're much better ones. They're much better ones, which would be but still, we can model natural selection, and it's extremely good.
That wasn't my criteria for science. I'm saying
said modeling.
No, I didn't merely say that. Brenda, listen. I'm not even. I'm going to wait for you to ask me to repeat it, or if you could.
Yes, you can. What is the problem with it? You can model.
Do you think I said science was just? Did you think that I just said science is about modeling? Do you think I said that? No, I didn't say that.
That's what you said.
Can someone? I mean, this is ridiculous. I said something that you can model in a law-like manner. That's what I said, right? I can model.
Science is not just laws. Science is not just laws. What are you talking about?
I don't know what you mean by science in that. If
you don't, yes, you don't.
Well,
science is not just laws.
There's nothing to disagree with there because I don't know what you mean.
What are you talking about? This is
I wanted to ask Danny this isn't a rabbit hole, but before we go down the rabbit hole that we're in any further, just a really quick question for Danny. When you said that biology is barely a science, were you being, I don't want to use the word literal, but was that maybe more of a tongue-in-cheek statement or not?
No, I'm quite confident that a lot of what biologists are claiming to do is just not something that is in principle reduced to science.
Is general relativity science? Is general relativity science, Danny?
It seems like it is. I don't know a lot about it, but
it's not law-like. General relativity is a scientific theory. It is not scientific laws.
It's pretty much math. It's really what it is.
It's a theory. It's a theoretical framework. It is not scientific law. You don't know the difference between a scientific theory and a scientific law.
Well,
you don't know what you're talking about.
One's descriptive, one is explanatory. Is that the right definitions for you?
Right.
Natural
selection is explanatory. It is not a law.
Right? Because I do know what I'm talking about. Right. I may not know the specifics about what the number of genes that a human may have or anything like that. I don't know if anyone knows that.
But theories aren't laws.
What I don't. Okay, well, it is controversial, by the way, about what theory.
Not anymore.
No, I think it is controversial as to distinguish a theory and a law, right?
Well, it depends. In philosophy, yes, I can agree with you. There's still a little bit of like, okay, well, what's how do these interplay? But in science, where I would argue they are used, especially in a more applicable manner, there is a fairly definable distinction between what a law is, like Newton's laws of motion, and what a theory is, like special relativity or general relativity or quantum theory.
But what they both have in common, I think, is they both explain. They both seek to explain the world, right? Now,
laws do not explain.
Well,
I would say that laws explain, but not to near the extent that a theory does.
The problem with laws is that they don't explain in a causal way, perhaps.
Yeah, right.
Okay.
No, that's exactly
like the
what
law. Like the law of conservation of momentum doesn't explain why the momentum is conserved. It's just describes that it is conserved.
Yeah, it's a description. It's an observation based on observed regularities that always obtain. Theories are theoretical constructs that use observations and natural laws in order to provide, an explanatory framework.
Y'all overlooked the notion of non-causal explanation, right? Like the idea is that there are certain mathematical truths, right? Like if you do a proof in geometry or even in logic, right? You can understand this notion of explanation that's not causal. Okay. Oh yeah, I get. Oh, this explains why this follows, and blah 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 blah. Right. So the point is that there's some kind of dependency relation about how the world is, perhaps, and these laws, right? Given that the laws are false, right, that actually generates predictions about how the world is. Given that they're true, there's some kind of relationship between that law and and whatever we're observing in terms of what's uniform, right? So it's not explanatory in a causal way, right? But if we talk about something like mutation as being a theory, I don't know, or a mechanism, let's just maybe people want to differentiate mechanism and theory, but how I would like to think about some theories is that they're sort of mechanisms, right? And mechanisms could be states of affairs themselves, like so something happens to the genome, right? And it is a mechanism, right? For some other kind of observation or some other kind of result or effect, right? So, but going back, I think Leo said something. Oh, what about biology? I think is unscientific. Well, for instance,
no. To me, it seems that biology, and I might be misunderstanding you, but it seemed that you were stating that biology is like barely a science because you can reduce it to more fundamental things. But for me, that just seems to be. I mean, I would agree. We can reduce biology to physics and chemistry, but I would say that that's what biology is. It's physics.
Well,
and
it's not
chemistry,
just merely that. There are things that
it's utilizing physics and chemistry in a quite a specified way, like condensed matter physics.
Sure, I could grant that, but actually the word barely doesn't really, that's not what explains why I said it, right? Because you're right. Just to say that it's high. You can reduce all of this stuff to other more fundamental understandings of how nature is. I think that doesn't warrant the word barely. Okay, what warrants the word barely are things like taxonomy. Okay, I don't think taxonomy is anything that can't be reduced at all. Okay, there are other things, right? Like
I would agree, but I think that's more just because taxonomy is sort of what's the word I'm looking for? It's I don't know if conceptual is what I'm looking for, but I would state that's somewhat accurate.
I would agree.
And I would state that it's because it's conceptual that you can't really reduce it. Whereas physics and chemistry, there are, to an extent, they are conceptual, but there's, how do I want to word this? There's more to it than just the conceptions. Whereas like taxonomy, there is, but there isn't, if you know what I'm trying to say. I don't really... Well, I'd have to think about it.
I'm just telling you what I'm saying, why I'm warranted in using the word barely. It's not because, when we're asking how does adrenaline affect, certain your physiology, that seems like something that I'm on board with in terms of saying, yeah, it's science, even if it's reducible. It's very practical to talk about the effects of adrenaline on the body, right?
Even that is also still... So like not like a universal truth. Like for example, what if you have like
it's reducible. It's all reduced. You can in principle reduce it, right?
Yeah. I mean, technically yes. It's just chemistry.
But you can in principle reduce the whatever. A lot of the things that they employ and to establish biological categories.
Also adrenaline is a chemical which can also be reduced to just atoms, and atoms can also be reduced to subatomic particles and so on.
Yeah, and that plays into what I was asking. Instead of just reducing, like, say, how adrenaline works on the body to chemistry, can't we just reduce that further to just quantum field theory?
Yeah.
Well, in terms of how we... I don't really have a problem with that.
Because to me, I look at the world as being emergent. And when we reduce things, like if I wanted to know what happens when I throw a baseball at the wall, there's a reason why I don't use quantum mechanics. Even though technically you could, it ignores a lot of those emergent nuances in what behavior you're going to see. And it's sort of like glossing over all of this nuance that emerges out of it being a baseball and not, say, a single electron. Because those will behave differently.
Yeah. So I'm not
the whole is more than the sum of its parts.
I don't want to dispute that those kinds of cases where like you falling down the stairs and breaking a bone, or you bouncing the wall. Right. I'm disputing things like certain like this behaviorism, right, or certain ecological studies, right? Right. Well, because biology is is a science that flirts with the intentions of life, right? And in terms of, it's very useful to make all these predictions and models for what your herd of what's in herds. Your herd of cows. Is it cows? Are cows in herds? Yeah. If you're trying to model what like the behavior of a cow population, right? That is, I think, a little problematic with respect to it being a science, right? I think that.
Would you consider it a special science? Like,
I think it's something like, I think it's just merely practical, not in principle something like that's reducible if you do posit the intentions of a population, right? It's just, to me, like studying a video game, like studying how you should play Call of Duty, right? You could come to know how, like how to, given the goals, given this, given that, right? You can really, learn a lot in terms of how to play the game, but it just doesn't seem like a science, right?
So Danny, Creation Myths asks, can Danny please be specific about what is barely science in biology? I feel like he hasn't provided a specific example yet.
Taxonomy. You don't listen.
Oh boy.
Quantifying. So taxonomy is simply categorizing things. It's like collecting beetles.
Is it science?
Right? Yes.
Okay. Well, that's the reason.
Or perhaps you weren't being clear, Danny, or you weren't being.
I said it twice.
Yeah, so I think that collecting butterflies is a part of science. It's collecting and classifying things, and that's science.
Do you think when slave owners collected people from various races and categorized them that was science?
that was a systematic. If they actually did it objectively, yeah.
Well,
Oh my God. Okay.
It would be
no,
science.
now
That
you-
doesn't.
now
If,
you're-
if
you're-
people
scientific,
categorize them
yeah.
to understand the differences between them and things like that, then yeah. If they were just slapping labels on different things, then no, that's not
Also,
a science.
let me point out that Danny uses that specific example clearly to like poison the well a bit, and also an appeal to emotion. So it's not really a good argument to use.
Wait, she's saying that it's something like that just the
Oh, highlight
categorization.
Icarus' comment there because that's really good.
Just categorization.
Icarus, yeah, that last one there. That I think that's really good actually.
No, that's I so firmly reject that. What Icarus just said.
Well, how is it
so-
different from what you're saying about biology?
Well, language involves intention.
What?
So
What?
Danny,
God, no,
I've
don't
met
go
this-
down that road.
I've met the same kind of extremely narrow definition of science among flat earthers. Flat earthers believe in the same definition of science as you do, as being extremely limited, right? To just a very narrow definition, and it's just not true.
There's nothing to respond there. I mean, I don't really care for your comparison.
Well,
They don't wanna use
no,
the tool.
you share with flat earthers the same kind of.
Look, you and flat earthers drink
blinker-
water. Y'all share a common property too. So.
No, it's done with a deliberate purpose in mind,
Yeah,
which
they
is to
deliberately
limit
drink water.
science.
You deliberately drink water, so you're like a flat earther
Yeah.
too.
Do you think astronomy is a science?
What? Astronomy?
Do you think astronomy is a science?
I don't know a lot about it, but the point is that whatever they're studying seems to be reducible to physics. So yes.
Well, it's
Well,
mostly
then
just
astronomy is
it's mostly
Go
just
ahead,
classifying. It's mostly just classifying stars.
yeah.
That's what-
I'm saying, okay, well,
you know, so
is
that's
that-
not science. So
Well,
astronomy isn't science.
Yeah, do you think that, first of all, most scientists thinks that taxonomy is a kind of science, is a branch of biology, right? And I could be wrong about that, but I'm willing for someone to correct me on that. Now, so that's something I dispute. Now, I don't think that many astronomers would say creating these categories of like, I'm sorry, comets and asteroids and
Stars, galaxies,
stars,
planets.
galaxies are just a useful way to talk about these things, right? But I don't think they're saying that when we categorize them and point to the quote unquote relevant differences, that's just a kind of like that's just as useful as using like addition or something, right? Taxonomy. I mean, basically something like let's see if I'm gonna butcher the definition, but in taxonomy, you look at particular maybe genetic differences based on or similarities based on lineage, and also some phenotypic differences and similarities based on may or may not be based on
It
lineage.
depends on what system of taxonomy you use. Like if you use cladistic taxonomy, then you use like a taxonomy based on like evolutionary lineage.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but
Right.
okay. So, do y'all think that when we map out my family tree, that we're doing science?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I think it depends on how you define science. Then
yeah, and this is the problem, right? This is a giant problem for me, right? And the only way that I can understand science is in one of those two ways, right? The kind of reduction that this is in principle reduced to something that's fundamentally natural, or that it is something that.
Do you think meteorology is science?
Well, I don't. Is it reducible to laws and
the atmosphere is made of just molecules, gas? Then yeah, so.
Well, then sure.
But you cannot. Of course, you can try to understand weather in terms of like looking at the individual molecules and see how they behave, but it's just not really practical to understand how the weather behaves. Then.
Yeah, they use models of the weather models that they don't model each individual air molecule. They use fluid dynamics and different understandings of how things work in the atmosphere to make their predictions. It's reducible to physics, but It's built on top of it, and I think it's just too restrictive to say, well, it's not science.
Yeah, I don't really see how that's like a rebuttal to what I'm saying.
May
I
I?
don't
May
know if it was
I?
necessarily intended to be.
I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
I think it's just like a discussion between a reductionist approach to a holistic approach.
Well, the point is that what I mean by science in these contexts is either one of those two things, right? And in that sense, there's not much to dispute. Now,
the only thing I can say is like I don't agree with that definition. So
well, the point, like, there's certain things that you can predict, model, and quantify. Like what creation myths is saying that is that something we can't quantify, predict, or model. Look, you can there could be a discipline that you can quantify, predict, and model, but it's not science, right? There's something extra going on with the natural or the scientific inquiry other than just merely being able to predict it, right? I can predict that if I'll come back to StreamYard in the next week, right? And in fact, I can even model my behavior in the mornings, right? I eat 2 eggs and 2 pieces of bacon, right? But that's not. I just don't see that that's being science. So it's not just about making predictions simply, right? It's a kind of prediction. There's a kind of there needs to be more ingredients to this. Is what I'm trying to say.
So what you are describing is like I think you are describing sociology, like the behavior of like people in a social setting.
I don't think that's science. In the same way, I don't think studying Call of Duty strategies is science. Or even chess strategies. Like you can make all these models about if you move this piece and
isn't there something called game theory, or maybe I'm misapplying it to something it doesn't apply. Like,
I think it's related. The idea that I think that game, man, the last time I talked about game theory, or listened to game theory, Daniel Bonavac has a video on it that I was watching, and I didn't watch the whole thing, so I'm not going to be prepared to give an answer.
But I had a question about the while back.
Creation myths. Wait, he should come in here, right? But I just gave you an example. We can model what people's breakfast. You can quantify the number of eggs I eat every day. I mean, is this science?
In some aspects, maybe if you're trying to.
Well, look, we can broaden the definition of science, right? As anything we can predict or anything we can model, but then suddenly things like Call of Duty and football and like all these other things suddenly become a scientific venture. But that's going to make a lot of, I don't know. I feel like
everybody should look at the chart I have on the screen. Like literally everything that we do and see and observe and define can be to physics. Oh fuck! What the hell did I just do?
You can reduce chemistry to physics, Leo.
Okay.
Well, technically, yes, but I put them together because they're very close. But almost everything can be reduced to this. The fact that we can reduce everything to physics and chemistry doesn't necessarily mean that we should always use specifically physics and chemistry to understand it, or that we should, or more so that we shouldn't use broadly physics and chemistry, because biology literally is physics and chemistry. It's just how physics and chemistry work within a specific system, namely living organisms. Astronomy and astrophysics literally is physics and chemistry, just how it applies to celestial bodies. Weather literally is just physics and chemistry, but it's the physics and chemistry of our atmosphere and all the stuff that happens in it. Computer science is, well, physics and chemistry of what we can do on computational systems. So they all reduce to the same thing, but we're taking physics and chemistry and applying it in more specified ways.
Well, I think I was making a more stronger claim about biology with respect to there are parts of biology that are touted as something that might be reducible to physics and chemistry, but I don't particularly think so.
Oh, like what?
Like I think population studies, like about
population is reduced to individuals.
Ecology, right?
Right.
Well, I don't think individuals are reducible to physics and chemistry.
Well, they are made of atoms and particles, and.
Well, I'm not made of atoms. Maybe you are, but I'm not. I think that a lot of what biology relies on is, or at least rather, I shouldn't biology, but like ecology relies on are just what an organism might choose to do or might do. Right now, we can talk about just the behavior. So like the eating, right? The wolf moving its mouth up and down while a rabbit is in between it, right? Like we could talk. That's in principle reduced, right? And so, but I mean, I think taxonomy might be a one, but like there's little things that have to like that appear in certain parts of the discipline that I kind of just say, well, I don't really see how.
But I want to ask you the question, like you were saying, like about like, oh, we can understand the heart separately from like biology, right? So biology is like barely a science, but we can still understand the heart. But the heart itself is also a biological structure, right? So can we not just reduce that also?
Well, no, I mean the heart can be reduced to a non-biological structure, right? I don't really think like, and this is one of the things that I'm going to make this claim. I'm going to make some people, but I don't even know if life exists in the sense that like some fundamental particles exist, right?
No, I don't know. I think so. Life is an emergent phenomenon, yes.
Yeah, and so now if you're studying some kind of what you're calling to be an emergent phenomenon, that already kind of, there's a useful sense. Like I said, we can study the enzymes in the liver, right? And we can really make these things, really reduce these things in a way where it's very practical to talk about the liver in one kind of way, right? And I don't really have a problem with that. I think people are doing science. I think medicine can be construed as science, right? I think that, the studying of like cell communication, right, could be, something that imprincipally understood in terms of like, more fundamental particles or whatever. I have no problem with that, right? I think I'm just saying that they're parts of like what makes life. Why is it that we say? What if some person said viruses are actually alive and just
some do actually? There's quite a few biologists that say that.
But do y'all see that there's real disagreement? I don't consider that to be disagreement, right? If someone says I think a virus is alive and someone thinks I think it's just active, right? Is there genuine disagreement about that? I don't think
it's alive, maybe, but not life.
I just don't. The point is that they just obviously mean something different by life than if you think that viruses are not alive and they think they are, you obviously are talking past each other. You have a different concept of life, and so whereas people with it, that's not so simply an issue with respect to chemistry or even physics, right? If I said, there's, I guess the level of consensus of I think
it's like a situation like how many grains does it take to make a heap?
That's called Sorites paradox. Yeah, I don't know
maybe.
that. Sorites paradox attacks vague notions, right? And is life a vague notion? Well, usually, I think these vague notions that Sorites was talking about had to do with things that were on a spectrum, right? So now is life on a spectrum? It seems like most people think that it's either or, right? It's not like somewhat alive, right? But you can
maybe it is, but yeah.
I don't know. Maybe there's a third category, but typically people like the category of it being either alive or not alive, right? Whereas something being hot or not hot, or hot or cold rather, that seems to be something that's on a spectrum, or it's like it's gradational. I think that's the term. And maybe you think life is that way. The point is that I don't think any of this is a substantive conversation. No, not our conversation. But imagine if someone was debating what exactly makes a pile, and you think there's no fact of the matter. Although there are people that do think that there's a fact of the matter. I feel like when you're debating about what life is, right? There's not in the end. There's not going to be any substantive agreement. But if you're talking about how do electrons behave, right, in these controlled conditions, right, that seems something that you could potentially disagree about, right? So I think that the notion of disagreement might help us too, right? that I don't know what it would mean to say I disagree that that's a tarantula. I think that we should say what you call a scorpion should just be a kind of tarantula. I feel like it's just a big semantic verbal dispute, right? But the way that chemistry and physics might work, I think, is that when it comes to the principles of these things, right, there can be genuine disagreement. So, like, if I say that wolves eat rabbits, okay, I mean, first of all, that I would say that's a natural thing, right? Because we can understand that process in terms of more fundamental things, but it's not like we're not really. So that's the second definition. But then with respect to the first definition of science, like there are wolves that don't eat rabbits, right?
Right. It's a contingent, like it's not a universal.
Exactly. Yeah. So if people were arguing about is it in the nature of wolves, or is it their tendency, right? That's a better term than nature. Is there a tendency to eat rabbits? I just don't think there's I think that's just so it's like the particularism thing, right? It just depends on the environment, and there's nothing to disagree about other than if someone were to think that there was a tendency with respect to it. And if now let's say there was a tendency, like a law-like relation, right?
I'm not laughing at you, Danny. Continue. I'm sorry.
So creation myths. No, I think there is a way to draw a line, and people that don't think there's a way to draw a line, I think they're scientific anti-realists.
Danny, what's a particle?
A particle?
Yeah, what's a particle?
I'm not so sure if
would you consider a grain of sand a particle?
I in one sense, yes. Like I think
would you consider an electron a particle?
I thought a particle was some kind of mathematical thing, right?
Yeah, but the point that I'm getting at is sort of like a physics and analog of what creation myths is getting at. Like, I've never met a theoretical physicist. I've asked myself personally three relevant professionals what a particle is. Got three completely different answers. There were some similarities, but what defines a particle doesn't really have.
Wait, do you think there's genuine disagreement there? Like, if you talked to three separate physicists, they all gave you different meanings of the word particle. I don't think there's genuine disagreement there.
Oh, there is. There definitely is.
Look, if I just mean
physicists don't agree on what a particle is, because, well, you can have particles of dust, then you can have electrons that are particles. You can have
it seems like this is equivocation.
Protons are particles, but protons are also made of quarks, which are also particles. So, what is a particle, or is it just a word that we're using to describe things that are kind of small and can be used to make up other things?
But that's what I'm kind of leaning. Go ahead, Nest.
I was just saying, like it depends on what scale you're applying to. Like it's just like in the system you have like units, and in that unit we just define the parts, but it can be different depending on the situation.
Yeah, right? and I want to go back to my if I were sitting here and saying let's create a discipline about the falling downstairs sub-discipline of whatever, right? Like let's create that. Let's say if someone were to say, well, look, there's no imprint. Like, I mean, okay. Let me see if I can forward this right. In the same way that there's no laws about that kind of thing, falling downstairs and right. There's no. I don't see. What are the laws of life, right? I mean, it seems like you're going to have to take a reductionist approach.
There are no laws of life.
So
there are no laws of life, right? But I mean, some people want to say that they're going to appeal to like law of segregation or Mendel's stuff or genetics, right?
But there aren't laws. There are many exceptions. There are actually more examples of non-Mendelian genetics than there are.
Yeah, exactly, right? Yeah. Like codominance, polygenic stuff, right? Like there's all sorts of stuff. But is there a debate about to happen between these two?
Apparently.
I don't know.
I don't know. Let's just talk about this for a minute. Ian Chen is going to debate Nephilim tonight, and everybody should listen. 7 p.m. Central, 8 p.m. Eastern, and we're going to do an after show.
It's 4 hours from now.
It's 4 hours.
Okay.
Well, it's
Yeah,
4
it is.
o'clock. It's 4 o'clock here. Well, it's 3:30 here, so 4.5 hours, right?
Do y'all know? Oh, Ian, I've seen him in the chat.
4.5.
So Danny, particles are made up of ickles.
I don't know what that means.
Neither do I.
Particle. They're made up out of ickles.
Like pop.
Don't-
Ickles.
It's
I
a
don't know
really
what
bad joke. It's a really bad joke.
Oh,
What are-
Ickle, did I miss it? What's the joke?
Yeah, they're made.
What are
Gee,
popicles? How about a popicle?
Oh, I get it. Okay.
I love the
It's
word
just-
conchicle.
just-
Conchicle.
Should we call quarks particles or testicles?
Conchicle.
So, Danny,
I mean, we
what do you
could
think is what scientists have the highest in law, fact, or theory, in what they hold highest? I mean, in the
If there were a hierarchy, which one do you think would be
Yeah.
at the top?
You know what I would like is I would like to see
Well,
Dan and creation myths debate.
I care a lot more about biologists than physicists. I think biology is much more practical to study
I
than
think-
like.
that's not the
top
answer.
dog-
Sorry.
I think top
Actually, I
dog
don't
is-
even know if I accept that either. Actually, because I like planes and stuff and engineering, and they don't rely on biological truths.
They
I don't
still
know.
rely on like laws and theories and stuff like that.
Well, I don't know. I think they're all
Biologists, yes,
very
and
impractical.
engineers.
Biologists rely on laws. Yeah, I don't think if there's a uniformity of nature that maybe there's a sense in which a lot of biology would collapse, but I think like all of chemistry would collapse and all of physics would collapse. But I think biology some of it would be intact.
I'm saying what word, theory, law, or fact would be the highest in science. What do you think?
What do you mean by highest?
Like if there were a
Like
hierarchy.
most fundamental? Oh, most fundamental.
No, like if there were a hierarchy, which one would be considered like above the other?
Like with respect to like explanatory scope or something, like the amount of which it
I
explains.
guess.
I don't know. I'm.
Which is put more confidence on in science, like I would say maybe. What can we be more confident about?
Well, to me, that's like a like what do I have psychological like confidence in?
Maybe I'm not being like.
No, I mean I don't know. I think no matter how you rephrase the question, I'm not going to know the answer because I'm not so familiar with how to like even weigh these different theories or laws.
I put in the chat fact versus theory versus hypothesis versus law explained
Thank you.
to help you out.
I really
want to answer it in the.
want to mention this, but I don't want to turn this into the O show.
Oh.
I gotta wait for Speed to give me permission.
Don't y'all love the O show? Don't y'all love that show? Like,
Well, he said he posted a link that destroys what Dr. Dan said. The link is from Answers in Genesis, so it's not even it's not even good. It's not that it should be taken seriously. It's not taken seriously.
The
So-
show begins.
Also, Leo, I want to ask you something like at the quantum scale. Do you have time asymmetry, or is time symmetrical in all directions at the quantum level?
I don't really know what.
Mhm.
I don't know. The question makes no sense to me
Ah.
because it would be like asking, is momentum symmetrical? Like that.
No.
The question doesn't really seem to have a meaning because at the quantum level of reality, time is not what it is when we think of like if we were trying to figure out what a baseball is doing. Time is something that other properties that the baseball have take place in. At the quantum level of reality, time is not something that things take place in. It's a fundamental property of things, no different than like position or momentum or energy. And that's
Like I saw some presentations by Sean Carroll about like the arrow's time or how do you call it
the arrow of time.
The arrow of time, yes. And when he explains that the only law that cares about the direction of time is the second law of thermodynamics.
Yes.
Entropy.
Oh, I know. Okay, I get what you're asking. Is there a difference between if you have electron moving in some given direction okay, this is really going to be hard because it's fucking quantum mechanics. So essentially, no, there's no symmetry to time. You could define something moving one way in time at the quantum level and moving the other way in time, and the physics stays the same. It's generally the same in relativity as well.
Yeah, yes. And Sean Carroll also explained that entropy, you can only apply entropy in a larger system of like at the macro scale where entropy actually applies. So
we don't really
that cannot be reduced to quantum mechanics. You cannot understand entropy at the quantum scale.
Yeah, we don't really know how thermodynamics plays out at the quantum level of reality. We're certain it's actually an emerging field called quantum thermodynamics. A lot of interesting work is being done there as well. I personally believe that all the 4 laws of thermodynamics are emergent from some deeper underlying quantum mechanical nomenological truths, I guess you could say.
Also, you can reduce the entropy to like potentially to quantum mechanics.
What's that?
Say that again. You can reduce entropy to quantum mechanics.
Yes.
All right.
I think that I would bet that decoherence might have something to do with it. That as quantum systems interact with their environment and decohere, this gives rise to what we would call if you were to take a ball and roll it on the floor, the reason it slows down at the quantum mechanical level of reality, which would be entropy, is because all of the fundamental particles that make up the ball are interacting with the fundamental particles of, say, the floor, and the information of both is decohering to the other, which causes the ball to slow down. Would be like a really, really simplistic explanation. That's just me personally. I don't know if really any theoretical physicists would agree with that.
The energy, like the energy of the ball, or the momentum energy, or how do you call it? The energy of like that dissipates into the environment, basically.
Yes.
All right.
I actually have a
Ness, are you a scientific realist or anti-realist?
What was that second thing? Interrealist?
Yeah, I was asking if he was an anti-realist or a realist.
Or anti-realist. So.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell would be the difference. I believe.
Well, something like, I think that anti-realists are going to say that science is just a kind of practical thing, where like these fundamental particles don't really exist.
I'm a realist.
Yeah, so a good way to put it is like a scientific anti-realist would say where general relativity says that gravity is just curvature in the geometry of space-time, there really isn't a space-time that's being curved. It's kind of like a fanciful description of what we can describe to the best of our ability. I am definitely a scientific realist. Especially within the realm of like physics and chemistry, most scientists are going to be scientific realists because
most philosophers of science are scientific realists.
Space. I would argue space-time is a real thing because it can be affected by mass, and that is what gravity is. It's not just like a fanciful, abstract description of something that's not really there. It's actually
in itself
an interaction of something that's there. Yes.
Do you have a problem, Danny, with time being bent or distorted?
Do I have? I don't. Not to my knowledge.
Well, I was just wondering because
I do believe, Danny, you are an anti-realist, I believe, correct?
I'm leaning towards it, but I don't. I
haven't subscribed to either at the moment currently.
Right, I have to read about it. I'm
more of an instrumentalist then.
Yeah, I think that's like scientific instrumentalism.
One version of anti-realism. Yeah, I haven't. It's something that I need to read about because I am interested in it, but I'm more interested in you have
to be. Yeah, you have to be a little bit careful because sometimes scientific realism means something different among physicists than it does among philosophers.
Oh, okay. What, do you take a position, Brenda?
I don't have a well thought out position. I would lean towards that science describes real things.
Okay.
Right? Like, so electrons, protons, and neutrons actually exist independent of us. Yeah.
Yeah, most of like Detroyer and Doorman, do you know, and Jack and all of them, they're all anti-realist. They're who else? It's the realistic nihilist. What's his name? Josh.
Is Sean Carroll a realist or anti?
Oh yeah, Sean Carroll is definitely a realist.
Yeah, I'm talking about my social group in Discord. They're all anti-realist.
I'm not sure that is Detroyer really an anti-realist?
Yeah, he doesn't accept natural kinds or anything like that. Well, okay, let me rephrase that. He doesn't accept natural kinds, which lends me to think that he's not a realist. But he's a Humean with respect to causation as well, and his whole view about like laws and theories with respect to these natural things, as we might call them, he's not very clear about his views of that, but it's not straightforward. So it just really makes me believe that he's an anti-realist.
I have a question, like, or maybe I'm not applying this in the right sense, but like science we cannot use science to determine whether we are or not in the matrix, for example. So yes. does that mean that that science is necessarily not realist?
No, that's not. It's not. I mean, you can think that problem is unsolvable, like, or you might think that problem is solvable, but just not through scientific inquiry, and be a realist.
All right.
Yeah.
The Otangelo Show.
So, are we done with the stuff? I had to drop out because my mom called, and mom takes precedence over you guys.
We went from natural selection to biology, barely being science, and then all the way to physics. We went all the way. Speed.
That was the beginning of the Otangelo Show.
All right.
I'm probably going to get a copyright strike over
No,
that.
you're not. No, you're not.
Fuck,
I think
it's
isn't it within 15 seconds or
I don't know.
seconds or
and,
something
and I've
like
heard
that?
that if you speed it up, it helps. I mean, if you speeded this shit up, I don't know.
Here comes a mutiny to slaughter Odians. Like, yeah, this God is one of two possible explanations of our existence. The other one is nothing. Actually, no, we have an explanation of our existence. It's physics and chemistry explain why we exist. And there are people that just deny that because they want to argue that it's a magical anthropomorphic immortal. Sure, cool, yeah.
Also, sex explains why you exist.
Yeah, which is physics. Physics of motion.
I couldn't help that. It's a bit on my mind.
Where did physics and chemistry come from? Well, so physics and chemistry are abstractions of what reality. Who do you think asked it?
Oh my god!
The physics and chemistry are just abstractions of what reality, how reality is structured, and how it fundamentally operates by humans. For chemistry, if you're arguing like where do like all the atoms that make up each element come from? Why do they have different chemical properties? They come from
why do water molecules behave like water molecules?
Fusion. Yeah. They come from thermonuclear fusion and what we call chemistry, as in that these different atoms have different chemical properties and can react in different ways, is a result of something called spin statistics theorem, which tells us it's essentially the Pauli exclusion principle, which states that the things that make up atoms that can be grouped into something called fermions, they don't like if they are. This is really hard to put it. If you're allowed to combine two fermions in the same way, they don't want to be anywhere near each other. So, like, if you have two electrons that have all four quantum numbers that define an electron are exactly the same, they can't occupy the same orbital. They cannot happen. 100% cannot happen. So this gives rise to different orbitals and different numbers of electrons, which gives rise to different chemical properties. So the reason that there is like physicality in chemistry is because of, well, quantum mechanics.
Leo.
Yes.
Are you familiar with Dr. A.S. Barwich? Do you
Nope.
follow her? Do you follow her on Twitter?
I do not.
She I think it's a she because her name starts with Anne, but I don't know. She's published
the name.
She's published a book called A Smellosophy.
Smellosophy. Oh, that sounds cool.
It's about what the nose tells the brain.
Oh, nice.
And there's a I can put the link in here.
Yes.
There's a link to, not to the book, but
you've got a wrench, right?
They have I'll put it. My mouse is not behaving.
So Tangelo asks, why is there quantum mechanics rather than not? Well, quantum mechanics again is an abstraction of like how physical reality fundamentally works. So it's like asking, why is there philosophy rather than not? Because humans decided to develop it as a means of understanding the way that reality fundamentally works. Go ahead, Brenda. I'm sorry to interrupt.
Okay, so she has an article called Imagining the Living Brain, an Argument for Ruthless Reductionism from Olfactory Neurobiology, published in the Journal of Theoretical Biology. And you can get a link to that. I put a link that does work. And it is yes. I skimmed through it. It's a really good article. And it presents a strong argument for reductionism and using the nose and our olfactory system instead of perception. But what it's talking about is that they have they're able to image the living brains of animals at 1 second granularity and down to the neuron. And so they can literally track down to the neuron.
Did you say 1 second or 1 millisecond?
1 second intervals is what I understood. 1 second intervals down to the neuron, the reactions of the neurons to getting stimulus from their olfactory systems. They've done it in rats and other animals, not humans because that would probably kill them. But we can kill rats, but not humans. So
doesn't seem fair.
They've got a very fine-grained tool that allows them to track exactly how the neurons are responding, and they're saying that this is a major. I'm hesitating to say revolutionary because I'm not in a position to say that, but that's what they say, I think.
Well, if you could track down one neuron at 1 millisecond is what about 30 milliseconds is what we're really looking for. But this is pretty damn good. Because when we get down to that level, we're going to start to really explore thought.
So Leo, if you email me, I think I can email you the copy because I got a copy through my U of M library.
Oh, awesome!
Permissions.
Yeah, sure. I can put my email into. I don't know if you have it, but I can put it.
Probably not.
It's not hard to remember. There was a comment that Otangelo made that I wanted to respond to. He said, quantum mechanics is not a causal mechanism. Quantum mechanics isn't a mechanism at all. It's a formalized mathematical theory that's, I would argue, is more or less statistical, that describes mechanisms, causal or not. And there are mechanisms in quantum mechanics that are not causal. And then he asked, why is there motion rather than not? Because motion is actually, Immutable's comment is a little lower than that. Quantum mechanics is a statistical theory. Yeah, took the words right out of my mouth. Also, there is motion because things change over time. Yeah.
Also, like the question, why is motion relies on the Aristotelian assumption that motion needs to be constantly pushed to have motion. Like when they thought that if you don't push things, then they will stop automatically. But of course, the Newtonian mechanics, when it moves, it can keep moving forever.
Ness, where did you hear about Fodor's argument?
A couple of years ago.
Who told you? Did you read the book or?
No, like I was in a group with others, and they presented it to me, and I.
Wait, who?
At first, I don't know. Remember the specific person?
Was okay. because there's very few people in this community that know that argument. So I'm confident that you got it from someone that taught it to me, right? But anyways.
Say, Brenda,
Jesus.
Brenda, can you link me the? Would you mind sending that to me too?
It was on my phone, and I'm seeing that there are a bunch of PDFs that I have that are just numbers. So I'm going to have to go through them to find out which one is it. But I will when I can find it.
Thanks.
You know how they do that? They just give them a bunch of numbers for the PDF, and I hate that.
I don't think Otangelo understands that movement or motion is more abstract when you get to the quantum level of reality, as everything is.
Yeah.
He asks, so what is the prime mover? That there isn't one. That question is meaningless. Actually, yes, there was nature before the Big Bang. In the inflationary epoch happened.
Mm-hmm.
The grand unified epoch happened. And all of these are before the Big Bang, yes. The Big Bang is 10 to the negative 32nd seconds after t equals 0 to 1 second after t equals 0. Inflation occurred before that. We've actually gone before the Big Bang. Well, I should not say theoretically. Hypothetically, we've gone before the Big Bang. I mean, we're pretty certain that inflation happened. I mean, I don't know any cosmologist that's going to say that it didn't. But we can't actually observed it. We haven't actually observed it.
Yeah. Also, like again, he's saying so. No prime mover started movement. Like again, that is appealing to Aristotelian physics.
Yes,
movement can be just forever.
Yes, Otangelo, there was time before the Big Bang. Space-time existed before the Big Bang. He thinks the Big Bang was like t equals 0. No, that's actually not what the Big Bang is. The Big Bang has been redefined as the moment immediately following inflation. Yes. Let me read something from PhD theoretical astrophysicist and his senior science contributor for Forbes magazine. Quote, even with all we've learned about the Big Bang and what set it up, it's impossible to draw a robust conclusion. We don't have sufficient information in our observable universe to know whether time is finite or infinite, whether it's cyclical or linear, but even before the Big Bang, we can be certain that space, time, and the laws of physics themselves definitely existed, end quote. He also says in another article, quote, what happened prior to inflation, or whether inflation was eternal to the past, is still an open question. But one thing is for certain, the Big Bang is not the beginning of the universe, end quote.
Otangelo, are you 4 years old asking why was there this rather than not?
Why was there inflation? Because the inflaton field decayed, which created a drastically anti-gravitational force that drove space-time apart at a very rapid pace.
Who was that you quoted before?
Ethan Siegel.
He's with Forbes magazine. I've been amazed. His articles in Forbes magazines are some of the best.
They're phenomenal.
Popular as far as popular science that I can read. I mean, if it's got tensor calculus, forget it. I can't read that shit. But
can I point out what Otangelo is doing? Like he keeps asking, like when you give an answer, he keeps asking, "Oh, why is that?" And then when you give that answer for that, and why is that, and so on. So he's waiting for you. He's waiting for you to say, I don't know, and that's when he sticks God into it.
Yeah, because it's just a God of the gaps. Oh, you don't know? Well, that means it was God. What caused that field into existence? Well, probably nothing. Quantum fields don't need to be caused.
What Laurie Hayes famously says is he just tells his kids to go to bed now after about five of those questions. Go to bed. Which is pretty fair, I think.
And I was actually listening to it. It wasn't a debate, but it was a really, really good discussion between Hans. Oh, oh, Jesus. Hold on. Let me look at my history here in YouTube. Because he's a Christian, and I liked what he has to say. Hans Halvorson and Sean Carroll at Caltech had just a discussion about physics and metaphysics. And Hans himself said, if you're just looking for gaps in our knowledge, we could just say, well, that's where God comes into the picture. You're going about it all wrong. And most, like even some of the biggest scientific minds of the days of yore that believed in God, like Isaac Newton and even before him. That's not what they did. They believed that God was ever present in all physical processes. So what Otangelo is doing, where he's just waiting for a place where we don't have an explanation, saying, boom, God, is just not how the vast majority of the most intellectual theists have gone about it. It's just not.
Yeah.
Hey, Danny.
Well, if you have a positive case, then provide the case and don't say, well, how do you know that? Or how do you know that? Like,
Speed, could you put your email in the private chat?
Why are you asking my email, Brenda?
Well, I wouldn't think that you wanted it. Do you want it?
No, you asked for my email.
Could I have your email, please, Danny?
Nope, no problem, Brenda. I'm getting it for you right now. There it is. Okay.
Could I have the password to your computer too, please?
Yes.
If I'm wondering if Otangelo thinks God is a logical inference, then how come the people that know infinitely more about the science than all of us put together haven't made the same logical inference? It's almost like it's not a logical inference and it's just an a priori assumption he's making, and then he's walking backwards from his conclusion, looking for evidence and cherry picking it to fit that conclusion, rather than walking forward, examining all of the evidence and arriving at his own conclusion. And he keeps saying the universe has a beginning when literally no cosmologist is going to say reliably that the universe had a beginning. And any of them that do are speaking tongue-in-cheek, as most of them have said they are.
I was going to ask Danny how he was doing, but then he puts my email in as Speed Sucks 2021. So fuck you, Danny.
What are you gonna? How am I doing with respect to what? Like,
what are you doing, man? Did you have a good time here? I'm just worried about you. That's all.
Oh no, you should ask. You should ask. Brenda's known me for 3-4 years, right,
Really?
Brenda? Yeah, Brenda.
Yes.
I have gone against legions of people on servers, and this is
how did you survive?
Danny's a black belt. Danny's a black belt.
Oh, Leo, Otangelo is again referring to the
Valenkin does. Yeah, well, Valenkin's personal beliefs on it are a little odd. I don't personally subscribe to them, but I can't say that they're like completely unjustified. He believes that the universe just originated in some quantum nucleation event. He believes that the universe had a beginning, but that it did not begin to exist, because both of those phrases, beginning and begin to exist, have different ontological connotations.
But yeah, like the Speed, I think I really appreciate these conversations because it helps me articulate what I think, because that's really difficult to do. So I practice. It's a kind of practice, and then also now I really want to read about realism and anti-realism with respect to science. So it's kind of inspired me to read about it. I
describe you more as a black hole than a black belt, but that's just me.
Well, I do suck.
Otangelo should really catch up on the cosmology, because again, he doesn't understand what is meant by the word beginning, and I've explained it to him probably half a dozen times. He says the majority believe that the universe had a beginning.
What do you mean by beginning?
I mean that there is some point past which we don't know anything about, but that doesn't actually mean that there's a beginning. What most cosmologists believe is that there's some point in the past where our knowledge about the universe terminates. There might be something before it. There might not. We don't know.
There you go.
Pause a minute. He's saying that Einstein believed that the universe had a beginning, but he believed that it was eternal, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, he believed it was static and everlasting.
Yeah.
Hawking also didn't really believe that the universe had a beginning in the sense that Otangelo is. See, Otangelo thinks that the universe began to exist and is conflating that with beginning. And as I've already stated, those have separate ontological connotations. Your house has a beginning at the front door, but the house doesn't begin to exist at the front door. The whole house already exists. Like a ruler begins at the first inch, but a ruler doesn't begin to exist at the first inch, because the sixth inch exists with the first inch, just not at the same location on the ruler. So he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about, like usual.
But there's
and he says I'm not an authority and that I hold to the B theory of time like almost all physicists do, which is just stupid. And I've never once claimed to be an authority. I just get my information from authorities on the subject.
I think there's still a question, though, even if you think that you might think it's an unintelligible question, and I don't think you need an answer to it. I think you could just say there's like kind of a brute contingency. But like, there's still a question about why would a static eternal universe exist rather than not. But you might just think that it's kind of some kind of like brute necessity or something.
Yeah, I would argue
Also-
it's just nominal. It's just nominological.
Also,
It's like laws?
Otangelo is like appealing to like different authorities, but when he cites Einstein for the universe of the beginning, it tells me he's not really actually listening to what the authorities actually say.
Also, Krauss doesn't really think that the universe has a beginning.
Yeah.
In the sense that Otangelo is using it. Most cosmologists don't.
Is like a universe from nothing is like a more of a tongue-in-cheek.
And he keeps thinking that if time is tenseless, that means we know the future. That's him saying, well, what happens tomorrow is no different than him saying, well, what's happening in Belgium right now? I don't know. I'm not there. But Belgium still exists. It's real. It exists in space-time. I'm just not there to be experiencing it. Tomorrow exists. It's real. It exists in space-time. But I'm not there to be experiencing it.
Yeah,
so if Otangelo's
like,
going to ask that question, he would have to admit that Belgium doesn't exist because I don't know what's happening there.
It's like not getting object permanence with respect to time instead of space. Right.
Most people I ask about the whole A or B theory of time usually take an in between or something like close to B theory. But I'm someone that's fully embraced B theory. I haven't really encountered, at least in my personal life. You know, most metaphysicians they're B theorists, right?
I don't see how you can I don't see how it's really tenable to believe in A theory.
Neither do I. We've kind of shown that it can't really be the case. One of its most fundamental assumptions we already know is not true.
What is that fundamental assumption?
That there is a universal now, that there is a preferred temporal frame of reference, and there isn't.
Like if I were on the moon and I spoke to Leo and we say now, like it's not the same as we say experience it.
Yeah, there's like no becoming.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, temporal becoming is not something that actually happens. And A theory says
I don't
that it
know,
does.
but that seems like it's not a simple issue for me.
And it also depends on the framework from which you look at it. So I mean,
also, Otangelo says it will not be there anymore sometime in the future. So,
but
Sorry,
it will
what
still be there at the times that it is there. So what he doesn't understand what the tenseless theory of times. He just doesn't understand it.
I mean,
he doesn't grasp.
I understand the fixation on characters like Otangelo, but what I'm not particularly interested in him for some reason. What is it? Is it that there's like a lot of history?
It's just funny. It's just funny to see how somebody can fumble with understanding complex issues, but speak about them with such certainty, even though he's admitted to me numerous times that he doesn't understand physics and he doesn't understand the math behind it. But here he is making statements like the universe definitely had a beginning. Tenseless time is definitely, it's ridiculous, and then claims I'm not an authority, but literally almost all of the authorities believe that time is tenseless. And then he'll cite those authorities when they say that the universe has a beginning.
Yeah,
and they mean something different than what he does. But then when those same authorities say that time is tenseless, all of a sudden we can't listen to him. There's just no consistency.
And some of those authorities, like Einstein, say the exact opposite of what he is saying. They say so,
exactly.
Yeah.
Danny, this Otangelo is this community's tasteless.
Yeah, it seems like that, and that's precisely why I asked the question. Like, I've talked to Tasteless before, and then I always flog myself for it. Like,
yeah.
Who's Tasteless?
Tasteless opinion is another community's Otangelo.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, is he like a twin?
No.
I think Tasteless is much worse though, because at least Otangelo you can like understand what he's saying.
Okay.
I would have to agree. I have to agree with you.
You know, like you might have to repeat. Yeah, but Tasteless, he says stuff, and then it's just like, what the hell are you talking about? You know?
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Like sorry. My question to Otangelo is like when you are referring to like the authorities to say the universe at the beginning, even though like Einstein, for example, actually doesn't. So my question would be like, why do they think the universe at the beginning? Can you explain why they think that. Or are you just saying like, oh well they know better than me, so I will take them at the word for it. So, or are you, like, that's probably my question.
Anyway, guys, I think we should all get a life.
This
Coming
is
up on 2
Well,
hours.
the life.
I kind of have to go because I have.
Yeah, we have a debate tonight with Ian, and I suggest everybody watch this. I know a little bit about the debate.
Can you tell me a little bit about Ian? Like, what's his background?
Ian Chen, I call him Dr. Ian Chen. He's not going to tell you. That would spoil it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it.
Watch the debate, and I want to do an after show. So please, Leo,
I'm taking off.
Brenda,
Bye, Brenda.
if you want to show up tonight, that'd be cool. We'll see you later. Okay.
I'll try to remember. I sometimes forget, but
Okay. I'll try to send you an invite.
One of the things I hate about StreamYard is every time you post a YouTube comment,
Yeah, you can't see it blocks the names. Yeah. It's a secret. Ian's background is a secret.
Did Otangelo left, or maybe he doesn't want to answer my question? Like, I don't know.
Would you ask him?
Like, I asked him, like, when he's referring to the authorities to say the universe at the beginning, even though some of them, like Einstein actually don't. But anyway, when he's referring, can Otangelo actually explain why the physicists actually believe the universe at the beginning, or does he just take them at the word that the universe at the beginning?
At this point, it would be appropriate to cue the Bible tells me so music, because that's the only thing that these guys have, and the only place they're ever headed is the Bible tells me so, and that's where they start. He doesn't know shit about any of this. So,
oh my God, Otangelo is saying that Danny talks too much, like the pot calling the kettle black. I think.
Yeah, those
I don't disagree with Otangelo that Danny talks a lot, but I don't mind talking a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, I try to let people speak.
When?
Like,
You're passionate. I get it.
I prefer people. Like, I think interruption is actually a good thing.
Really?
Yeah. When people now, I don't let anyone interrupt me, but like if someone, like if Ness wants to interrupt me or Leo wants to interrupt me, it's because presumably I trust them to where like they don't say, "Hey, don't waste your breath. There's already something we can talk about," or there's some problem that if we don't solve, everything after is just going to be a waste of breath, right? That's how I interpret them. But
Otangelo and Nephilim get interrupted because they start to state their point, and then they go on and they start teaching us about all of science.
That's precisely why they should be interrupted, right?
Yeah, exactly.
But,
Stop.
Yeah. But I just there's certain people I trust that, like, if I make a claim or make a premise and then there's and that's disagreeable, why would I go on to the second premise or elaborate if they don't know what I mean by the first premise? I prefer to be interrupted.
They want to do the Gish Gallop and hope that you'll forget about the first premise.
Yeah, I can't keep up with it, man. Like it's and I need people. I don't. So just so you know, like most, like you, Speed, Leo, and Ness, like if y'all, I don't mind being interrupted. It doesn't bother me to be interrupted. And then if I say, well, look, I'm going to elaborate on it, let me finish. That's y'all are all going to respect that, right? Like, so it's just like there's interruptions are actually they're efficient tools in the context of like good faith, actors, and
it's inevitable, especially in like online settings. Like accidental interruptions often happen, but Otangelo cannot stand it for some reason. Like he needs to get his word in. Like online settings, like
well, hey, Otangelo, we were just talking about you.
Oh, really? I had my fun listening.
Otangelo, why do you? I mean, look, I get it, but maybe I understand why I would do it. But you come here all the time just to get like abused and mishandled, and I really don't understand. Otangelo, can you please explain?
I have my fun at Speed's channel as well, even being abused sometimes,
Okay, I mean, it's fine. I used to do the same thing to myself, like because I would go into certain Discord servers and I would always trigger them with abortion because I lean towards pro-life. I really sympathize with pro-life supporters, right? And that seems to do enough to trigger a lot of people on the internet. So I just constantly go in, and they would mute me, they would abuse me.
I just leave when the abusation is too much, and then I just leave.
Well, that's a tautology, but that if it's not, because if you wouldn't leave, then it's not too much.
Okay.
Okay, I see what you mean. Well, I'm not a masochist, so
no, I know what you mean. I'm just kidding. Yeah, but okay, you're not a masochist here. Okay, just making sure you're okay no, I mean, I was, Speed was abusing me today and yesterday.
Speed abuses everyone.
Abusing you?
No, I mean, like, I would.
You are an abuser, Speed.
He was like, there was like all these like, this is so silly. Fodor just doesn't, and then wouldn't even respond to the argument. So I get it, like.
Well, because it was.
It was stupid, wasn't it, Speed? It was a stupid argument.
Yep.
No, I'm just teasing. But okay, go ahead, Ness.
Oh, I was just saying, like, can you answer my question, Otangelo? Like, are you like when you are referring to?
Well, I was actually looking for a quote somewhere where it confirms that Einstein thought that the universe had a beginning. I've not had enough time to do.
Okay, you'll have fun. I gotta go. Bye.
But I think.
Bye, Danny.
He was wishing that the universe is eternal, and I think he actually even cheated in the 1915 formulas and maths, which he then tried to adjust in order to say that the universe was eternal. And then I think Hubble, he showed the evidence that the redshift and all that stuff, and then finally they all had to admit that the universe is expanding, and that brings backwards to a single beginning of the universe. And I mean, that claims of Leo, but it's not so, and so forth. I see that just silly,
Here's the problem that I have. Like when you in the chat claim that Einstein believed the universe at the beginning, and now you are actually saying that you actually didn't know that he actually believed. Like you try to look it up to know whether he actually believed. At the beginning.
I think that quote.
You're interrupting me.
Well, I have at my link the universe at the beginning a sentence where it includes Einstein and several other peoples. I just copied that from somewhere, from some other place. But I think that Einstein, he wanted actually the universe to be eternal, but then he had simply to admit that the evidence of the redshift and all other kind of evidence had to lead to a Big Bang and the beginning of the universe. And it's not just scientific evidence, it's also the fact that you cannot go infinitely regressing back in time. And also the second law of thermodynamics is another line. I think there are 3 lines of reasonings and evidence that leads to that conclusion that the universe had to have a beginning.
Oh, so you like that's actually answer my question. Like when you don't just take the words of the physicist, you're just like you have actually reasons that you know of to explain why you believe the universe at the beginning.
No, there are 3 reasons which I just pointed out in this. Like I said, first is scientific evidence, like Vilenkin writes a lot about that. That the universe had a beginning. Then the second law of thermodynamics.
Well, that's not evidence. It's like Vilenkin just says.
That is evidence that the universe had a beginning. The second law is very powerful evidence. The universe started in a low entropy state and is winding down, and it will be in a heat death in the future, in about 5 billion years or so ago. There is no mechanism to go back to a low entropy state.
First off, like if when you appeal to Vilenkin, that's not an evidence. That's just an appeal to authority.
Of course, is Vilenkin not an authority?
Yes, but when you appeal to authority, You're
I'm
not
justified
appealing
to
to
appeal
evidence.
to him as an authority, and he is appealed as an authority by many people. So I don't know why I should not be justified to do so as well.
But this is the distinction that I had made in my question. Like when you are referring to physicists, are you just taking their word for it, like you are appealing to authority, or can you actually explain the evidence for why they believe?
Why they believe? Well, no, I had so in my head, no, but I can link to a paper where he explains it with a lot of math and so forth.
So you yourself don't understand actually the reasons behind why they believe it.
Why Vilenkin believes? No, I'm not a physicist, so I just rely to what they say.
So you are appealing to authority, basically, then.
Yeah.
All right. So that's my question.
Okay.
Okay, guys, can we take a break before the debate because we got a long night tonight? So wrap it up. That okay?
Oh, I don't know if Leo wants to do something in like I don't know if you heard about the last thing. Like I asked Otangelo again whether he is just appealing to authority or whether he actually understands the evidence for why the universe at the beginning. But he says, no, I don't understand the evidence. I'm just appealing to the authority to make the argument for why the universe at the beginning.
Well, there's not necessarily anything wrong with that. It's just that you have to also understand
I'm not saying it's wrong
what the professionals mean when they say that. They don't mean that this is the moment that the existence of the universe started, just like your front door isn't the place or the moment where your house's existence started. It's just the point at which you can say that there's a beginning there.
Leo, you are
Same
simply
thing with the
ignoring
universe.
that when you have movement, you have time, and when you have change,
not necessarily. Movement occurs in time. Time isn't a result of movement, so you don't understand what time is. Also, time doesn't mean the same thing as quantum level of reality.
Infinite regress, Leo, and you are simply
yes,
not
you can. Yes, you can.
No,
There's
you
nothing. Yes, you can. Where in physics is it impossible? Where in physics is it impossible?
I can put a link, and then you.
Where in physics? No. I don't want a link. I want you. You made the statement. Now you explain it. Where in physics does it say that you can't extend the universe infinitely into the past?
It's not about. So let's suppose that you start now counting the days in the future. Can you stop and then do you have always a finite number of days and time, or can you get to an infinite amount of time?
You can't count to infinity because infinity means unbounded.
So you just confirmed what I am saying.
No, I didn't. There's nothing which states that time can't be unbounded.
Speed wants
can I interject for a moment?
I think we should respect him because he's very gracious to us. We can continue this conversation another time, Leo.
Can I interject for a moment? Like a few minutes ago, you admitted that you don't understand the reasons for why the universe is beginning. You're just appealing to authority.
That's not why. So you're strawmanning me.
No, you said that.
I said that I don't understand the math behind the papers which Vilenkin made. But we know that the redshift is a reason, the background radiation is a reason. We all know this, so that's not.
Those aren't reasons for the universe's beginning. The redshift simply means it's not. No, it's not the redshift. The redshift only shows that the universe is expanding. That doesn't mean that it had a beginning. That just means it's expanding. On top of that, the cosmic microwave background radiation simply tells us that the universe was significantly more dense and significantly more hot earlier on in its past. None of these make any statements to how the universe originated or if it even is a point of origination. So you should really brush up on the cosmology because it's quite frank and you've already admitted yourself you don't understand it.
Okay, cool. Leo, so you go with Nestling and are also strawmanning what I said. Fine.
I didn't strawman.
Okay.
I didn't strawman you.
I think you should
parroting what
you can continue this another time.
Well, I'm just saying, I didn't strawman you either. I asked a question and you gave the answer.
I think I was pretty precise, Nestling. I said that I don't understand the math formulas which Vilenkin has in his papers. That I don't understand, but in a grosso modo, we all know. In a grosso modo, we know the reasons which are being given why the Big Bang had a beginning in terms of science. That is the redshift, which demonstrates that the universe had an expansion. Can I finish, please? Can I finish, please?
You're repeating.
Leo.
Can I finish,
Redshift does not make any statements as to the beginning of the universe. It only tells us that space-time is expanding. So do not make a claim and then repeat the claim. I just got that correct. You don't know what you're talking about. Stop
Moderation.
by your own admission. You
Finish,
don't know what you're
please?
talking
Can
about.
I finish, please?
Let Otenjo finish.
No, I'm not finished. I'm just having fun with Leo right now. Speed, do you want to end the stream?
No, go ahead, Leo. Go ahead,
Otangelo.
Go ahead,
Oh,
Otangelo.
no. Okay. We have a no direction just walked in. Damn. Am I what do I have to pay to get out of here?
I try to do that from now on. I'm having so much fun just to overtalk Leo when he starts to cross when I am.
Leo, can you finish the reasons, like the redshift and then the other ones?
Yeah, the redshift, the background radiation. These are reasons which are given why back in time the universe had a singularity of beginning, and that's the scientific reasons.
All right, and now Leo.
So the redshift only tells us that the universe is expanding, which makes no statements to whether it had a beginning or not. There are numerous hypothetical models, all of which are viable, some more viable than others, that have the universe expanding, our universe expanding, but that it doesn't have a beginning. Also, the cosmic microwave background simply tells us that the universe that we are in, the area of the universe that we are in, began in a much more dense, much more hot state. That's it. They make no statements about the origin of the universe because we have no physics to describe that. So anytime somebody says that, well, the universe had to have a beginning, they literally don't know that because there is no current physical model that actively describes those regions. We have no clue whether the universe has a beginning or not. It probably does, but we don't know. And to say definitively that it does, they're just wrong.
If I understand correctly,
dark energy in science.
If I understand correctly, the redshift and the microwave background radiation disproves that the universe is a steady state model.
Yes.
But it doesn't show that there is an actual beginning to exist point.
Exactly, backwards. Because we don't know what physics was in play, how physics operated at the earliest moments of the universe. We have no idea because we have no physical model. Also, the universe was never in a singularity because singularities don't exist. Singularities are not physical objects. Singularities are what you get when the limits describing something tend toward infinity. Essentially, a singularity is where a function becomes a limit is either undefined or a function is non-differentiable. Yeah. That's all it means. And in general, those limits tend to infinity and become undefined. We can't differentiate those functions at that point because they tend to infinity. That doesn't mean that there actually is like a singularity. What it means is that our math is no longer capable of describing these regions because we need better math. And this is what happens when you get people that admittedly have no fucking clue what they're talking about, acting as if they do.
Otangelo left. But anyway, like I was actually vouching for like Otangelo to just finish his point, and then you can like.
Did Otangelo leave?
Let him.
Why does Otangelo leave every single time that I start typing in the side chat?
I don't know. Is it you or is it a coincidence?
I've had a few fun interactions with him.
Yeah.
And comment threads on YouTube videos, as well as a few live streams, and he immediately fucks off the second that I join the room.
He doesn't even say anything.
Like this is a good point that you were making in the chat. Like the universe, the universe that we now experiencing, like the expanding universe. That at the beginning, after inflation, but the universe still existed in a different state before still.
Yeah.
So
it
depends. Like it depends. Did the universe as in the state that we are now experiencing at the beginning? Yes, but the universe still at a different state.
Because I mean that's just trivializing.
Yeah.
What universe is to the point just so someone can say it had a beginning.
But I think
Leo, you used to be a fan of William Lane Craig, right?
Yes.
Yeah. How did Craig use the word universe in his cosmological argument?
By universe he meant the whole of contiguous physical space-time reality. His words exactly.
That actually meant all of physical reality.
Yes, and that is what I mean as well.
Yeah, and so when Craig is saying, like, Craig has this weird view that like the physical reality that we actually view and that we seem to experience is all that it actually exists. Anything that we have experience with directly or indirectly, that is physical reality, and that all had a beginning and it all has an origin. But the problem is that there's a difference between having a beginning and having an origin.
Yeah. And I said that earlier, that there's a difference between saying beginning and begins to exist. Those have different ontological connotations.
Yeah. I know you're a B theorist.
Yes.
You're very well versed in the difference between the two, especially because when I said, like in the last stream I was in with you, where I said that, a B theorist says that like now and then are basically equivocal to here and there. Mm-hmm. You immediately understood that these were indexical terms.
Yes. Yes.
So Otangelo doesn't actually understand that.
No. And the thing is, he says, well, I don't understand the math of Vilenkin's papers. Well, then you don't know what they're saying, because I've read quite a few of his papers, and there's, especially with stuff like this, there's a lot of math, and if you don't understand that math, you're not going to understand what the papers.
I don't know what like Vilenkin's papers, like I don't understand the math of it, but when it comes to him actually explaining it, and he says it is like,
that was the question that I was asking him, like when you are referring to like these physicists, like, are you just like appealing to authority? You don't understand why they believe the universe at the beginning, or can you explain why they believe the universe at the beginning? And he says, now I am just appealing to authority. I don't understand the physics behind why they believe the universe at the beginning. So, but then when he's arguing against you, then he suddenly does know all the reasons.
Yes. Well, that's how he is. But the one thing I want to clarify, I believe that the universe has, and this is me personally, and the physics may prove me wrong. I don't claim this is the way it is, but I personally believe that there is an absolute earliest moment in space-time from which the universe evolves. Like there's no such thing as before that moment. There just isn't. But I don't know that is the case. Otangelo was speaking as if that 100% has been proven by the science, even though science doesn't prove things. That's where my issue is. If we want to talk about the nature of the beginning of the universe, that's fine. But don't sit there and claim that it has an absolute beginning with absolute certainty, because you just don't know that.
So basically, to dumb that down for people watching, is that you think there is actually a first point on the ruler.
Yes.
And Otangelo thinks that there's something prior to the ruler
that gave the ruler a first point from which it sort of evolved in time, so to speak, which is an A theory of time. And I used to be an A theorist. I'm just not anymore, because
it's not really an A theory of time. What Otangelo is defending. So
he does defend the A theory of time.
He does, because he plagiarizes directly from William Lane Craig. And the fun thing about William Lane Craig is that if you press him on it a bit too much, William Lane Craig will effectively say that, no, a theory of time is true because God has the privileged frame of reference as to the flow of time, but God's perception of time, which is actually true, and the real perception of time and what really time is
A theory is true because magic.
No, it's A theory is true because B theory is false, but B theory is only false because A theory is true because B theory is true.
Yeah. The thing with Dr. Craig, and I still have some respect for him. I just don't agree with him on a lot of things. But when you can break open what he actually believes in terms of physics, he's a neo-Lorentzian. So he holds to what has been dubbed the Lorentzian aether theory. It's people who actually still believe that there is a luminiferous aether, and
really
that aether is the preferred frame of reference. So he essentially rejects special relativity.
Yeah, he does. That's why one one of the more damning, I can't remember who the fuck William and Craig was actually debating on this, but during the response time, they asked Craig to explain exactly how Einstein was wrong.
How does William?
Because that's the first the first premise of Kalam is effectively it says that Einstein is wrong about his perception of time.
Yes.
But also, but why? How does he explain the experiment about measuring the ether with the orbit of the Earth? So
that's Morley experiment.
Okay. So,
but does he think that the Earth is stationary, like the center of the universe, or something? I don't know.
So for a bit of historical rigmarole right now. Lorentz modified his particular hypotheses in order to incorporate relativity that Einstein had proposed, and as a result of that, rendered his own hypothesis unfalsifiable. There are some people who have attempted to amend it so that it is no longer unfalsifiable in principle, and they have repeatedly failed to succeed.
Yes. There's a reason
they are not physicists.
Yeah.
They are philosophers.
There's a reason physicists use special relativity. And another thing is a lot of the math, like E equals mc squared and stuff like that, kind of just fell out of special relativity, whereas you have to put them into Lorentzian or neo-Lorentzian relativity. They're not seemingly just almost inherently a part of it. You've got to work them into it. Also, how do we explain gravity? Because general relativity is just a generalized version of special relativity to curved manifolds. Nobody's ever been able to do this successfully with a Lorentzian or a neo-Lorentzian relativity. At this point, it's almost just like an Occam's razor issue. We're going to go with the one that gives better explanations with less assumptions.
Also, I remember from the debate with Sean Carroll and Craig,
such a good debate.
Just like Otangelo, Craig referred to the Borde-Good-Verlenken theorem, but then Sean Carroll pointed towards one of the authors of the theorem, saying the universe did not have a beginning, or I believe the universe did not have a beginning, and then it's a really good smackdown.
Yeah, the reason for that was that William and Craig has, for a number of the important thing to remember is that philosophy sticks its tendrils into a variety of different topics, and that everything ultimately derives from philosophy. But that means philosophers tend to be stylized to particular areas of interest. Like me, for example. If you start asking me questions about epistemology beyond a 200 grade level, I don't know anything about epistemology because that's not what I studied. I studied meta-ethics and normative ethics. I'm not going to know anything that you ask me about on those otherwise interested subjects. William Lane Craig is not interested in the philosophy of physics. And so he will use things that he deems compatible with the philosophy of physics and his particular conclusion. William Lane Craig will absolutely use the Borde-Good-Verlenken theorem, which, to my knowledge, could best be summarized as our ability to describe the unfolding of the universe under classical mechanics breaks down at a certain point, as being indicative of the fact that there had to be something outside of it that brought rise to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so basically by referring to that theorem to say the universe did not have a beginning is in a way an argument from ignorance, saying we don't know what happened before, therefore nothing had happened before.
It's a bit worse than an argument from ignorance. That's the terrible thing about it, because it's almost an argument from arrogance, which is he's insisting that I have a PhD in theology, and I have a PhD in this particular area of religious studies, and so I am competent enough to evaluate the works of these physicists. No, you're not. And the physicists, as such, in the Sean Carroll debate, flatly told you so.
Yeah.
Because, like, that's all that the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem really said, is that, like, under classical mechanics, the laws of physics break down at a certain point. That doesn't tell you anything about the cause. It doesn't tell you about the origins of the material universe or anything of that sort. And yet, that's something that is presented as a core piece of evidence in support of one of his premises.
Can I read you guys a quote really quick? I can't remember where I pulled this from. I tried to search the article really quick. I'd probably have to do some deeper digging, but this is I think it was an article written by somebody, and Victor Stenger asked Alexander Vilenkin a question, and I have this here quote. Mr. Stenger asked Mr. Vilenkin the following question. Does your theorem prove that the universe must have had a beginning? Vilenkin replied, no, but it proves that the expansion of the universe must have had a beginning. You can evade the theorem by postulating that the universe was, say, contracting prior to some time. But again, PhD theoretical astrophysicist Ethan Siegel writes in a Forbes article, does time have a beginning? He says the following quote, the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem tells us that all points in the universe, if you extrapolate back far enough, will merge together, and that inflation cannot describe a complete space-time. But that doesn't necessarily mean an inflating state couldn't have lasted forever. It could just as easily imply that our current rules of physics are incapable of describing these earliest stages accurately, end quote, as No Direction accurately stated not 3 minutes ago.
Oh, that's pretty clear. So Otangelo doesn't really have any footing on referring to these physicists to say, therefore, the universe at the beginning, because they say so, but they don't.
And the thing is, he's not. The big thing is that he's not understanding what precisely they mean by the term beginning. They don't mean what all the theologians, almost said theologists, the theologians and the apologists mean. And that's a distinction I will make until the day I die, until I'm blue in the face.
Of course, he will accuse you of word games then.
Yeah, of course. But there are different ontological connotations attached to beginning where there really aren't any ontological connotations, or at least not in a meaningful sense, versus the term begins to exist. Those aren't the same, and this is where it fundamentally comes down to which particular theorem of time or theory of time that you hold to. And the physics is, and I always say, regardless of what people say, regardless of what philosophers say, the physics, the actual experimental evidence is quite clear here. There is no preferred temporal frame of reference, which is what the A theory says, that there is one, and it's the present moment.
It's God. that's correct. But yeah, but like also another argument for Otangelo is like the entropy. Like if the universe was eternal, then we would be all in a heat death by now.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That ignores how that ignores the fact that we have no real we don't have a solid foundation for understanding thermodynamics within the framework of quantum mechanics. We don't even think that we're quite certain that thermodynamics doesn't operate the same way at the quantum level of reality. So and the thing is, we know that the earliest moments of the universe's evolution are quantum mechanical. We know that there's quantum mechanical events that can occur acausally. We know that thermodynamics operates completely different at the quantum mechanical level of reality. We just don't have a physical description of the earliest moments of the universe. It's likely that the universe has a beginning in the sense that there's just like sort of a boundary, a wall, and it's not that we can't get past it. There's no such thing as past it.
In the same way, the North Pole has a beginning.
Yeah,
it's a beginning relative to our frame of reference, that there is this first moment that everything seems to secede from it.
Yes.
Also, like if I understand it correctly, at the earliest moments of the universe, then you cannot apply entropy. Like you cannot measure how much entropy was back then.
Yeah,
not necessarily. You could actually, in principle, measure the amount of entropy that was present at the first moment, based on like how much like things were degrading in subsequent moments.
Mm-hmm. I would I agree with that. I would just put emphasis on the potentially part.
Yeah, like it's really potential.
Yes.
Like logically possible, yes. Is it actually practically possible? I don't think so.
Yeah, I'm with you. And that's the thing. There's so much that we just don't know. And I keep going back to that about the earliest moments of the universe, that we can kind of say, well, this is what we know. And if we kind of work with that and maybe go back a little bit further, it seems like this might be the case. But what we know here doesn't really apply here. So there could be other factors that we don't know about that we can't thereby incorporate into the model.
There is the idea that, at the earliest moments, quantum gravity was unified with the rest of the quantum forces, right?
Mm-hmm.
But that's just an idea. We actually don't know whether that is actually the case, right?
Well, we do know that gravity can be described at the quantum mechanical level, quantum gravity. We do know that it was combined with the other fundamental forces. We just don't know how that works, whether that changes any of the other laws of physics, because at least from my understanding of it, and I've only asked a couple of people about this that have the relevant knowledge. It's very likely that the laws of physics as we see them now did not exist as we see them now in the very earliest moments of the universe.
This goes back to Danny's reductionism. So now physics is also reducible to whatever happened back then or something like. Even more fundamental, maybe.
Yes, the breakdown of physics at the earliest moments of the universe would be akin to how Newton's laws of motion break down at the quantum level of reality. Right. There's a moment where they're still applicable, but they're really just approximations of something more fundamental. And it could be the fundamental laws, the fundamental constants of nature don't apply in the same way at these moments. They reduce to something much more fundamental, and things might be able to behave a little bit differently. And I would bet that if that is the case, it behaves in a very much in a non-intuitive manner, as we already know reality at its most fundamental level does.
I'm just waiting for someone to say that it turns out that reality was actually the result of the Aedra and the Daedra fighting with one another.
Oh, that would be interesting.
Yeah, it's just the Iata and Magnus fighting with Lorcan, and they cast Lorcan down, and that made man. Some Skyrim lore bullshit like that.
Yeah. I've only heard a little bit about Skyrim. Some of those names I was capable of.
I'm definitely not being paid by Bethesda to do that advertisement for Elder Scrolls 6.
But yeah, Top Dog made a comment. Other forces of nature are stronger than gravity at the very small. Oh yeah, 100%. Yeah, like electromagnetism. Gravity is not strong at all. That's why you have to have
isn't that like one of the weird things about it is that the force of gravity is so weak.
Yes, like
you actually entertain the prospect that gravity may not actually be a force.
Yeah,
it's like the emergent property of something else,
and that's what I think we're going to discover. I think that the way that mass interacts with space-time is going to be described by quantum gravity, but it won't, because it said that an electron has mass, so it should curve space-time, and I'm like, well, yes, but I think that a description of that I think would be quite different from what we see in general relativity with, like, say, what a planet or a star does, where it's interacting with space-time, but maybe not in a way that's curvature, where the curvature in its geometry emerges from these more quantum mechanical interactions of massive particles on space-time.
Also, if electrons have mass and electrons are like a point particle, then it would have infinite density, right? Or not? Like that's where the classical description, yeah.
It comes down to how we define particles, because the thing with particles is particles aren't ever actually particles. We can just reduce their waviness to a point where it's within a certain
parameter.
Yeah, it's within a certain parameter that the standard deviation, it's within certain standard deviations where we can say, okay, we can reliably say, yes, this is the momentum or this is the position of the particle.
It's probability. It's not the point, but it is the probability of location and momentum, basically.
The probability is always there. It's just you're reducing the probability to a point where you can make accurate statements about what something, how something.
It's basically like you're using color schemes on top of color schemes, where it's like you have one color scheme where it's on the far left, you have black fading to white.
Yeah.
And also, it goes from black to red to pink to white. And then on top of that, you have another scheme that's going black to pink to, and you just escalate it back. And there's actually no point where you can actually say, okay, this is the electron.
Yeah, you can just say
this is the particle.
Maybe an electron.
This amalgamation of shit here that does this thing.
Yeah. And that's
for every particle there is a field, right? Like there's an electron field and
And that was the thing. What No Direction just said. That was kind of the thing with the double slit experiments. Like, well, like you see this mess here. Like, you might find an electron there, but you can also find it maybe over here. You don't really know. It just depends.
It's both, but
yeah.
There is no selection for the particle.
Yeah, but reducing it down to quantum field theory is where, because reality gets very abstract and non-intuitive, and this is where I don't think it's the math that makes this hard. I think it's the fact that the math is so abstract and non-intuitive. It's really hard to sort of wrap your head around these concepts.
I don't think the issue is either of those things.
I think
what's that?
Sorry.
Like I genuinely don't because either of those things, because we tend to experience and understand things on basically the scale of experience that
I was just about to say that. Like I was just about to say that the issue is that we humans have a very limited perspective of the universe.
Yes.
Yeah. So like I'm just reminded of something that like Inspiring Philosophy had argued a few years back, and like one of the things that he had effectively said would have entailed that his entire view was parasitic upon something that would refute it. Mm-hmm. And the result of that was basically we experience things on X scale. Yeah. And as a result of that, X scale is made up of things that are like R, S, T, etc.
We
don't experience anything beyond the X scale.
Yeah. Like even things like the concept of up and down, like that is only true like if you're in a gravitational well. And
of course, not really, because up and down is just relative to like your frame of reference. But like,
so if you're
the actual like
down, but if you're
position with
that way, it's this is up, this is down. It'd be like up, up.
The direction of gravity, like the up is where, like you know what I'm trying to refer to, like the direction of gravity, like
in some sense,
yeah. But the idea is that like effectively, like we don't actually have any experience of what happens on the quantum realm is ultimately what it boils down to, and yet it behaves in a particular way. Mm-hmm. What best explains that particular way, we don't really know.
Yeah.
People like IP want to say that what makes it behave the way that it does is that there is an overseeing mind that actually persists and progenerates through all of space-time reality, and that mind is God.
He sees you.
Which raises the question, if God is ever observing, why the fuck did we actually observe the weird effects of quantum mechanics in the first place?
Yeah. He holds to he claims, I've heard him say it, that he holds to the Copenhagen interpretation, but he argues that consciousness causes collapse, which is the von Neumann-Wigner interpretation. I'm confused, like, okay, I don't know what
he holds to a neo-Berkeleyan subjective idealist interpretation of quantum mechanics, which I find to no ends delightful, because it's a view that says that like all of reality is basically a sum total of qualia, and first-person subjective experiences, and none of us have any first-person subjective experiences of the quantum.
Mm-hmm.
But he'll point to the quantum and say that, like, oh, that proves that my view is right, even though if his view is right, that realm doesn't even fucking exist because no one has any actual experience of that realm.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's got an interesting. I almost think, and I think you might have just used this word, that he's got sort of almost an idealist look at reality. He is
an idealist. He's a monistic idealist. Yeah.
Praise I am that I am has a similar view of reality.
No, he doesn't. Praise doesn't know the.
Well, I mean, in the sense that it's idealist and that,
it's all in your mind.
Mechanics, yeah, that
Praise has heard certain people say some impressive shit, and he just buys it.
Decided to run with it. Yeah.
So do you guys want to keep? Do you guys want to just keep running here? I've got to get some rest before.
I had one last question. Just like I remember like a Hawkins quote, like he says like, oh, because there is a law of like gravity, the universe can come from nothing or something like that. I don't know.
Correct me if I'm using this word wrong. No direction. It's either phraseology or phraseology. I don't know which one, but the phraseology. I think it's phraseology, but I might be wrong there. It's just,
I think the appropriate term, if you're thinking of what I'm thinking of, is bastardization.
Well, yeah. It's sort of a bastardization of what Einstein, Hawking was really trying to portray. He was taking a complex idea and trying to put it into more like colloquial terms, and didn't.
Well, no. It wasn't. The error wasn't on Hawking's terms. Like, I know you're a William Lane Craig fan, and William Lane Craig was one who actually endeavored on the bastardization.
Who the fuck is the William Lane Craig fan?
Leo.
Yeah, I used to be a William Lane Craig parrot when I was a theist.
Yeah,
I'm waiting for him to have like some more debates.
Okay, used to, because don't make me boot you.
I still follow him. I mean,
I actually met William Lane Craig when he came to my university. That was fun.
Wow.
Yeah, he refused to take a picture with me.
Why?
The debate in
because you have the atheist beard.
That too, like I have the sit and goatee. But,
goatee, yeah.
Oh man.
That's just an error of genetics. It's a weird combination of First Nations, Iranian, and I don't know, Slavic genes results in this shit. But also because my professor at the time was Eric Dayton, and he had just finished debating him, and he was very salty after that debate.
Eric, do you know if that debate was ever if that debate was ever public?
It was not public, but you can get an audio recording of it, and it is available on YouTube.
Also, hasn't like Craig argued for like when you like believe in God is just rational by itself. You don't need any reason to believe.
Okay.
Like
Properly basic, I think. Is the term
no. There's a difference between like arguing that like the belief that the existence of God is properly basic, and also arguing that faith is compatible with reason. There is a profound distinction between the two.
Nikolai, why did you misrepresent me in saying that Kant was
Jesus, we're not discussing this right now.
I never said Kant was a coherentist, and you
Oh Jesus, here we go.
Leo, did he say Kant was a coherentist?
I don't even remember.
No, what I did was when we talked about foundational beliefs, I mentioned Kant as being a constructivist, right? But I think then you inferred that therefore because I was using Kant to support coherentism, that you thought that Kant was that I thought.
Yeah, well, I'll just neg this in the butt real quick.
I love.
If I misunderstood what the hell you were trying to get at, I'm sorry.
That's fine. We'll forget it.
That's it.
Well, I think I've said enough in chat. I watched the debate that happened a few hours ago on MDD, or not. It
Where
wasn't
did
live.
you
It was
get
the,
where do you get your philosophical background?
but-
Nikolai? Where do you get your philosophical background?
Where do I get it?
Yeah, are you an autodidact, or do you have a degree?
I got my BA in philosophy, and I was working towards my MA before I dropped out of university.
I'm working on my MA right now, so
Yeah.
I hope I don't do the same. I'm working and studying at the same time, so it's
Mhm.
difficult. I don't know if you did try to do that.
Depending on where you are, you may or may not, because we slashed huge amounts of the humanities where I was actually located. So as a result,
Really,
I actually
philosophy
can.
departments usually do okay, but they
They really don't in Canada.
Oh, okay, okay. But in the United States, almost every university has a philosophy department. But it's true that not every university offers like a degree. In
Oh
fact,
no, like we still have philosophy departments. Like you could still pursue a PhD degree, like a PhD in philosophy if you wanted to in my local province. I could do that if I wanted to. But the issue is that the route in which I could pursue that PhD isn't actually the area of interest that I have.
Oh, okay.
My area of interest is predominantly within meta ethics and normative ethics. Applied ethics, not so much, but like things like epistemology or perhaps I don't know,
logic or stuff like that.
No, logic. I actually find logic very interesting, but unfortunately, like I've taken a few logic courses through Alberta because they aren't offered in my province. But it's becoming increasingly difficult to actually like study the things that I view as of interest,
like worthwhile.
For me personally, not worthwhile, because I recognize that. With the exception of meteorology, I think that everything is worthwhile.
Are you a realist? A moral realist?
A moral realist? No.
Okay. Do you take a particular
can
position?
somebody remind me what that is again? I'm sorry to interrupt, but I completely forgot. And also, just really, really quick to Icarus, one-word answer: Copenhagen.
Something like that. Like there are moral facts, like independent of minds. But there's.
I'm not.
If you really want to reduce it down to the bare bones of it, it would be that it's not just that there are moral facts; is that there are like moral properties that are extant in actions or individuals that are real things that exist.
Wait, are you familiar? Do you think that if they're value properties, you're committed to like a moral realism?
No.
I think for something to like morality to be applicable, like that there needs to be like minds that experience pain, happiness, and things like that. Like if you like live in a GTA 5 world where you don't experience pain and you get shot and you just respawn somewhere else, like morality would not be an issue anymore. Anyway, so. Like, right.
It basically has to be, you have to relate the effects of your actions and your personality and your character traits based on like what it does to others onto yourself.
Yeah.
That sounds very. Do you drift towards the continental tradition or the analytic?
I don't know what that means. So sorry.
I was talking to direction. You should know.
Like I can just short circuit this right now is that I tend to describe myself as a quasi-realist.
Oh, okay. Who Blackburn? Is it Blackburn? Who are the quasi-realists?
That's how I lean. Would be a good way of putting it. Is that like the main thing is about it is that I'm not sold on any particular meta-ethical theory, but I tend to favor things like what Simon Blackburn or Alan Gibbard have to propose.
Yeah. But I mean, I'm a particularist, so I think a lot of these like normative ethical theories are just like kind of like historical artifacts.
Well, that doesn't really seem relevant because I'm also a particularist about like normative actions, and that's entirely compatible when you're talking about quasi-realism in relation to like some.
No, it's true. Like
reference
particularism doesn't commit you to anti-realism or realism, right? You can be a particularist and be a realist.
Yeah, no, it tends to favor the more like the normative aspect of it. Like
yeah, but that's the thing, right? Like,
and so
point...
when like that's kind of the thing that's weird about it is that I don't know why you'd bring that up when it's like if you ask about like what someone's normative, like what someone's meta-ethical stance is.
Wait, no, normative ethics.
Well, I'm talking about like meta-ethical stance.
Yeah, no, particularism is not going to point you towards like a realism or anti-realism, but in terms of whether you accept utilitarianism, different modes of a certain deontological view, that seems to be a spit in the face of particularism, right? Because there you're kind of employing some kind of theory or set or principle, maybe. Rather than like taking the circumstances or thinking that it's a contextual issue. So that's why I invoked particularism, because you talked about normative ethics, which is distinguished from meta ethics.
Well, right? I had actually mistakenly used normative ethics there. I am a bit drunk right now. I'll put it there.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. No. I did say normative ethics when I meant meta ethics, but I don't know.
I agree that you can have.
What exactly is your question? Or
I'm just saying that the whole normative ethics thing to me is like more like of a almost nearly a historical interest of mine, rather than some kind of like I'm not trying to get at some kind of theory, right? Of a
historical interest.
For me, meaning like I like studying Kant, I like studying Mill, I like studying these various views, but I don't myself produce a theory of ethics, right? I don't know if that makes any sense.
That sounds like pretty well everybody in like I'm sorry, but that sounds like most of my classmates. Yes,
but the point is that I'm not like
you take everything in like. There are merits to be found in all of these different avenues. Like I absolutely love Kant's account of freedom. Kant's account of freedom is probably one of the most powerful accounts of freedom that I can.
Are you a libertarian?
I'm not a libertarian, but I still love the notion that like how he summarizes and contrasts autonomous action versus heteronymous action.
Okay.
Where he says that when you act autonomously, you act in accordance with a rule that you give yourself.
Mm-hmm. Versus contrast,
as opposed to like he was responding to individuals like Hume at the time, where he was saying that like when you act in an attempt to satisfy a particular desire or some basic need or something that would make you feel good, like you're acting heteronymously,
not in accordance with a rule or something. What is that?
Yeah, like if the main motivation for acting in accordance, like the main motivation for acting in a particular way was to satisfy a particular desire, you were acting heteronymously, and that was a term that he invented to contrast that with acting autonomously, and I like that. But that doesn't mean I actually agree with Hume.
Do you think I don't? There's a lot of technical terms for Hume that I'm not familiar with, but does he think that like desire? I don't think he thought that was like a kind of truth apt thing, right? Like he didn't think that like to have a desire is like to have some kind of intentional state.
I'm taking off.
See ya, Leo.
Peace
Bye,
out.
Leo. En de daarvoor.
There are two ways that you could interpret Hume on that. Predominantly, people would insist that like having a particular desire or having a particular inclination meant that you had something that was actually non-intentional. It was something more akin to an instinct.
Yeah. That was my interpretation, but I don't...
That tends to be the predominant instinct, and it's one that I agree with, but I also tend to be of the camp of people who think that you can have intentional states if you have these instinctual states.
Really?
It's not. Yeah, it's not very.
Instinctual seems like some kind of like implying some kind of causal disposition. Like when
It does, yeah.
Okay, yeah, but you see, I don't see how that could be intentional. Like I guess, what do you mean by causal? Well, like, because
it seems to be that way just because, like, when we associate like an individual's intent to do X, it's because they took particular modes of action to accomplish that goal.
Right. That's to say the intention is the rule, right? It seems that's my view, but I'm trying to understand what you just said there.
Like, it doesn't have to be a rule. Like, just like if.
But that's
as an example now, like in what time is it? It's 5 minutes. I intend to go and stir the ozuboku that I have on the stove.
Okay, but that seems like it's a rule. That seems like a rule to me.
I may be establishing.
You can fail with it. We can fail or succeed with respect to it.
Yeah, I could fail with it, sure, but at this point, it also seems a bit habitual for me.
Oh, like you can cultivate. Like there's a sense in which you can like cultivate.
Yeah. Like I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm not all here right now, but
like,
if I could summarize this for you, that might like.
You ready to
go? To better explain like my normative attitudes, it would be a kind of virtue deontology sort of view.
Oh, I'm taking a course on virtue ethics this semester. I want to share with you, since you are familiar with some of the literature. I'm going to share with you these authors, see if you are familiar with these authors, because this is what I have to read, and then I got to go. Let me
I had a question to you, Danny, but a short.
Yeah, while I'm looking for this, maybe.
Right. Like I looked at your channel and I saw that you had this conversation with like Matt Slick about I noticed when Matt Slick said like that statements are like descriptional propositions.
You talked with Matt Slick?
It was a waste of time. I'm never doing it again.
Yeah, I was gonna ask, like, why the fuck did you do that?
No, well, it was like was it like a year and a half ago? And he makes the claim that if like they're propositions, and that implies they're a mental, like a mind or something. And it's a really shitty argument. And I pressed him on it, and he ended up changing the subject. But anyways, go ahead. What were you asking me?
Yeah, I know, like he says that the laws of logic are like absolute, they are transcendental. But then he says that they are statements, and statements are like descriptional statements, or I know the specific wording he said. But
it begs the question when he says that, right?
But when you said they are descriptions, then can descriptions be absolute? Like, isn't that a contradiction, or maybe I'm wrong on that one?
It depends on what he means by description. Typically, descriptions like can either refer to like we want to differentiate the propositions that refer to like how things are versus how things ought be. So there's like a prescriptive distinction, but I don't think he was talking about that. So then I think descriptions just meant for him like proposition or something. I don't know what he meant. Now, otherwise, then they're going to be some kind of linguistic thing, right? Where there's like something being used to represent something else. Sometimes just that's like the colloquial notion of describe.
When I hear him say that the laws of logic are like absolute, they are like interwoven in the fabric of reality. But when I hear him say that they are descriptive, then that's something else, and they aren't that's confusing the map for the place. The map describes reality. It is not the reality itself. Like,
example. I think that if we're trying to be he's horrible, right? I think Matt Slick is actually not only horrible philosophy person, like horrible interlocutor.
He was very rude at the end.
I think he's a bad person.
Hold on, you need to make that clear, because Matt Slick is not a philosophy person. Matt Slick isn't actually concerned with philosophy. Matt Slick is somebody who got a master's in divinity, which in any other accredited university would be a bachelor's in a particular field. And Matt Slick is interested particularly in philosophy, in theology, And theology is a bastardization of philosophy. And that philosophy, in its most robust sense,
I don't think we disagree. I just meant something like he's a horrible
like
interlocutor.
nothing is actually off the table. But in Matt Slick's case, in theology, there is a couple of things which are off the table, which is the existence of God and the truth of Christianity, in which case he is not willing to actually acknowledge or recognize any fault on his own as a result.
Oh yeah, like when Danny pressed him like, how do you support these premises? And he was like, why are you asking all these questions about your premises? And then he changed the subject to like, oh, are you a Christian? Like, oh, all right. Like, yeah, it's really weird.
It was the first time I talked to him, and I talked to him for like 18 minutes, and then I realized, not worth it.
No.
Yeah, but no, Nikolai, I know we did not kick it off well last time, and I'm sorry I was really aggressive towards you.
No.
I was aggressive towards you. I just want to say that I didn't. I don't think that.
Let's put it this way. I was very northern Saskatchewan against you.
You were what?
Very northern Saskatchewan against you. Very northern 306. Which is like where I'm from. We tend to resolve disputes more by punching people in the throat.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's what you mean. Okay.
We're the fucking Mississippi of Canada. So
I also wanted to say that I like you, Danny. Just saying, even though my personal field, like what I'm studying for my master's, is biology.
Yeah.
And of course, when you say like biology is barely science, of course that might put something like someone like me off, but still I don't mind the disagreement anyway. So right.
Yeah, well, I mean, I don't know about the biology thing. Really has me kind of twisted with respect to like, well, how do I cash out science?
Yeah.
And I think that like the point is that when I think about it myself, there's like a broad notion of science, and then there's like these like really strict notions that if carried out, like there's a lot of problems for what people are doing in labs. And
I noticed there are some terms like special science and soft science, like sociology and psychology are soft science, like that. Maybe it's like a problem like defining what a game is. Like you have like a strict definition, but then you have also these other examples. Like, are they games or are they not?
I hope not. I hope that's not what it becomes. Like
it isn't. Yeah. It isn't, because like if you play that sort of regression game back, you do kind of end up in like what Wittgenstein was talking about, where you have these terms that have familiar resemblances. But the ultimate issue is that there seems to be certain things that are characteristic of science, and we're trying to hone in on what differentiates this particular enterprise from other things.
Yeah.
Now, even if this is a matter of family resemblance or something, we do want to whether recognize or artificially impose a hard line of determination, and whether or not that is warranted is something that we actually have to investigate and explore. And you should explore these different kinds of avenues of science. And as a result of that, you can legitimately say that things like the shit that Karl Marx was doing isn't actually science. The shit that Charles Darwin was doing.
What about
may
Skinner?
or may not have been doing science.
What do you think Skinner's behaviorism was like scientific?
I'm not familiar.
Oh, okay.
Like off the top of my head,
I wanted to ask you this last question. Are you familiar with Julia Anna? Is it Anna and Rosalind Hurthouse? These Hursthouse. They're I've never heard of them prior to this book, but they're big on the virtue ethics stuff. So I didn't know if you were familiar with them. Julia Annas, or Annas. Here, let me put it in the chat.
Their names do not ring a bell. I'll put it that way.
What about Philippa Foot?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, I know Philippa Foot.
Yeah. Okay.
Like Alison McIntyre, like G. Anscombe.
Yeah. Those are the two. I had heard of but I had not heard of these characters that I just put in the private chat.
Linda Zigzansky was another one.
Okay.
But
Well,
that
that'll be interesting. I'm gonna.
That being said, like I should edit that. I'm sorry. Linda Zigzansky is less to do with virtue ethics, I think, and more to do with virtue epistemology, I think.
Oh.
I might be getting that shit mixed up, but yeah.
All right, I gotta go. I'll see y'all later. Bye.
Bye, Danny. I think he's gone just to let us talk. I think, but I don't know if we have something else to continue. I think I'm going to bed because it's now just past midnight here where I'm at. So
yeah, I'm not going to go to bed, but I am going to go and join another live stream because I totally know what the fuck Danny was just up to. So
the rage. Where are you headed?
Oh, I might just head over to another off-air stream where it's like Danny was basically giving me like, oh, here's introductory ethics course quiz. Do you know these people? I was like, fuck, bitch, I haven't read that shit in like 5 years.
Anyway, okay, we're going to end the stream finally. So goodbye, everyone out there. If there's anyone left, I guess there are 12 people. So, okay, ending.